down! Akira!
I'm not gonna lie, I have been obsessed with this book for the past few months. Hey, I'm Nico, and today I'm gonna be breaking down the plot and characters of Stephen King's The Long Walk. So if you've never read this novel and have no intention of doing so, I got you. We're gonna go through this together. First to start, I want to cover a little background info on this book. So The Long Walk was published in 1979 under the name Richard Bachman. So this is a Stephen King novel, however, it was published under a pseudonym at the time. This is because, allegedly, Stephen King's publisher had a rule that he could only publish one book a year. And as we all know, Stephen King is an insane person and publishes way more than that. So he started writing under a pseudonym so he could publish more than one book. Despite being published in 1979, it was actually written between 66 to 67. So this would have been one of Stephen King's earliest written works that he wrote when he was around 18 or 19, like a freshman in college, which is crazy for me to think. Like an 18-year-old wrote this book and it's getting made into a movie. Insane. Okay, now that we've covered a little bit of background info, first and foremost, I do want to kind of give you guys a very brief summary back of book reading because I do think it gives you a little bit of good contextual information going in. So the actual back of book summary is, against the wishes of his mother, 16-year-old Ray Garrity is about to compete in the annual grueling match of stamina and wits known as the Long Walk. 100 boys must keep a steady pace of 4 miles per hour without ever stopping, with the winner being awarded the prize, anything he wants for the rest of his life. But as part of this national tournament that sweeps through a dystopian America year after year, there are some harsh rules that Garrity and 99 others must adhere to in order to beat out the rest. There is no finish line. The winner is the last man standing. Contestants cannot receive any outside aid whatsoever. Slow down under the speed limit and you're given a warning. 3 warnings and you're out of the game. Permanently. Alright, I wanted to kind of give you guys the reading of the back of the cover, just because this book gives you no backstory, no context. There is literally no explanation done for the world or the rules really whatsoever. So going into the novel with some of that knowledge does make reading it a little easier. So here we cover what The Long Walk is. It's a competition. We just get the general knowledge that this is some form of future dystopian America. And that's really all the information you're ever given. At no point do we get any actual explanation or reasoning or context for any of that. So most of this information you can pick up in the book through contextual clues and through little snippets of dialogue, but I do think it's a bit easier to go in with all of this knowledge already in mind. So we know what the Long Walk is, and we know the general rules. You have to walk at 4 miles per hour. If you get 3 warnings, any more than that, you get shot and are killed. And the prize is whatever you want for the rest of your life, which as a prize, I love. It's super fucking vague. That could literally mean anything, and I like how that functions in the story. The prize is literally whatever you want. So in here, it also touches on the fact that you don't receive any outside help. So people outside of the competition cannot help you. And then this isn't covered in the synopsis, but it will get brought up eventually in the book that there's also no inside interference. The boys are not allowed to physically harm each other, trip each other, anything like that. This is a pure endurance competition. So the novel kicks off with Ray and his mother arriving at the starting point for the Long Walk. We know the walk itself starts at 9 a.m. They are there a little bit early. We get a conversation between Ray and his mom where it is shown that his mother and most of the people in his life are not excited for Ray to be involved in this, and she is actively trying to talk him out of it. Ray refuses. He is determined to go through with it, and after they say their goodbyes, he then goes and introduces himself to some of the other boys who are waiting there. Here is where we're going to meet some of our core cast of characters. So we're going to get Peter McVries, Hank Olson, and Art Baker are the 3 main ones who are introduced in this chapter. So like I said, there are a lot of characters in this novel, and we're going to be working hard to keep track of them all. So these 3 are very important, and I'm going to be kind of going through each one of them right now. So Peter McVries is described as having a large scar on his face, being tall, well-built, with dark hair. Hank Olson his defining characteristic is that he is overly confident. He comes in, introduces himself right off the bat to Ray, says, "Hey, I'm Hank Olson." How does he say it? He says it, "Hank Olson's the name, walking is my game." And that literally gives you all you need to know about him. He is almost insufferably overconfident, but is also very friendly and is a friend to Ray. And then we meet Art Baker, who is definitely a little more reserved than the others. The only thing we get to know about him right off the bat is that he's Southern and speaks with a Southern accent. So besides those three, the other major character we're going to meet here is the Major. The Major, while they're all waiting for it to start, comes rolling in on a military jeep, and he's described as being a tall man with khaki pants, a pistol strapped to his belt, and wearing sunglasses. I'm assuming sunglasses like these, so, thematically relevant, that's why they're here. Also, they keep my hair out of my face, which I like. So he's described as always wearing sunglasses, never seen without them, which is an important little note to give. I do think it's a nice character detail. It shows that we never see his true emotions. We never really see what he's thinking or feeling. He gives off a very inhuman facade. So the Major is, as far as we can tell, the leader of this totalitarian regime. Like I said, no real explanation or context is given, but based on the clues we see throughout the novel, the Major is, if not the dictator, he's just an extremely high-ranking official. And he is the one who leads and puts together the Long Walk every year. So in the book, we get a great quote about the Major, and this really gives all the knowledge you're going to need to know about him. Because he himself is not a major character. He is in the book, he's important to the book, but he more so haunts the narrative. He is a presence over the entire novel, despite not actually being in the novel very much. Like I said, this is his first introduction, and this is what Ray Garrity has to say about him. He says that according to his father, the Major was the rarest and most dangerous monster any nation can produce, a society-supported sociopath. And literally, that's all we need to know about him, and it describes him to a T. So after we get the Major arriving in the Jeep, he does a roll call of all the contestants. So he calls out every boy's name, hands them a number, and from the get-go, we can tell that every kid is utterly starstruck by this man. They are so, overwhelmed to be meeting some man who is, larger than life. He's treated like a celebrity. So they're all going up, shaking his hand, and are just so excited to meet him. And here is where we get mention of another very important character. So this is a character named Stebbins. Remember Stebbins. Stebbins is important. So Ray does not yet speak to Stebbins. We get no actual interaction between these two. But he takes notice of him because, one, he is a loner. He's the only boy off by himself. We get told that he's wearing purple pants and eating a jelly sandwich. He's described as being very tall and thin, I believe with blonde hair. So this is our physical description of him. And this is important because when his name gets called up by the Major, he shows no emotion whatsoever. Doesn't speak, doesn't smile. He said he keeps his head down, takes the number, leaves. Which is bizarre enough that our character takes notice of that. And it's enough for us as the readers to take note as well that of every single character, Stebbins is the only one who is not excited to meet the Major. The boys then line up at the starting line, preparing to start, literally counting down the seconds until it turns 9 a.m. Second clock strikes 9, the walk begins. And I feel like I need to preface this now. The walk really is just walking. The structure of it is they're on a wide road. There's going to be 2 half tracks, so 2 motorized vehicles on either side of them with soldiers on it. These soldiers are armed and they carry supplies. They're there to provide water, food, and enforce the rules. And they're there to eliminate competitors as they slow down and stop walking. So the entire novel really is just these group of boys walking and talking for days on end. So as the walk begins, we get introduced to a couple other guys who Ray didn't get a chance to meet before it started. So here, right around the first mile mark, is when we get to know Gary Barkovich. So Gary Barkovich is also an important character for opposite reasons to everyone else. He is our reality TV star villain. He is the heel of the story, if you will. He's an insufferable prick, and he's introduced as just being this really annoying guy who butts into a conversation and starts spouting off about his plan, how he's like, I got a plan. I'm gonna win this whole thing with my plan. And immediately everyone is ticked off by him. He's just an insufferable little prick. Now, after we get introduced to Barkovich and we keep going, the group starts splitting into 2 distinct sections. So we have our main pack group and then the vanguard, who they describe of a book of a dozen or so boys who are walking exceptionally fast, and they kind of split off from the main pack. Now, this is only important because it kind of sets up this grapevine plot device that gets used where people up in the front will find something out, and then through the rumor mill, all that information will trickle down to the rest of the characters. So this will come up again throughout the book, is like, oh, the rumor mill, the grapevine. Every time something important is going to happen, it'll usually get talked about from the guys up front, and the information will get passed down to the main group of boys that we're following. Garrity, as he gets going, starts thinking about the first long walk he ever saw in person. So we get a little bit of backstory with Ray and his dad, where him and his father went to go see a long walk when he was a small child. He describes being a spectator watching as the walkers walk by their hometown. And he does describe it as pretty horrific. He says that one of them was specifically screaming the whole time about how much it hurt. And he remembers being a kid and being excited to see someone die. So Ray's dad, though, took him to go see this long walk as a bit of a cautionary tale. We get to know the fact that Ray's dad is against the long walk. He's against the current political climate, and he was actively speaking out against the long walk. He took his son to see it in order to show him how horrific it was. So these are really Ray's main memories of his father, and this is the only background knowledge he really has about this competition. It's just that brief snippet that he saw as a child. So as they continue walking on these first couple miles, we get our first hint of a very important thing that will be coming up again and again, which is spectators. As they start walking into their first town, we get that there are people alongside of the road who are watching and cheering him on. They're cheering on the long walk. Like I said, this is treated as a national pastime. It's essentially a sporting event. So we have groups of people carrying signs, cheering on their favorite walker. And the long walk starts off in the state of Maine, and our main character, Ray, in classic Stephen King fashion, is from Maine. So he's like the hometown hero, and most people are cheering him on specifically. And initially, when he first sees these spectators, Ray is ecstatic. He's so excited to have people cheering his name, and it kind of gets him pumped about the competition. Like I said, things have just started out. He's feeling good. He's feeling confident in himself. There's a beautiful young lady who's holding a sign with his name on it. He runs up, kisses her straight on the mouth, takes a warning for it, by the way, runs back, and he's feeling like big man on campus. Like, Ray is feeling good about himself at the start of this book. It's right around here, after he gets that smooch, that him and McVrees have a very important conversation. So him and McVrees have been buddy-buddy, jokey-jokey, been friends throughout this whole couple miles of walking. And McVrees tells them, he's like, hey, we're friends, I like you, but this is a competition. Essentially, if you fall, I will not pick you up. So McVrees is establishing right off the bat that no matter how much him and Garrity get along, he will not help him out in this competition. He's like, if you're gonna fall, if something's gonna happen to you, I will not be there to save you. Let's put a pin in that conversation. That conversation is important. It will come back again later. So once we get past that, we get past those first few spectators, we then are around the 6 mile mark in, and this is where we meet Harkness, another named character. So Harkness is a writer. That's his main character trait, is that he says that he's a writer and he's gonna write a book. He's like, I'm gonna write a book from an insider's perspective of the long walk. And he starts going up and interviewing all the other boys, getting their names, their numbers, a little bit about, like a little backstory about them and, why they're doing the long walk. And of course, everyone is immediately shitting on Harkness. They're saying that that's the dumbest idea ever. Like, either you're gonna die here, or if you do win, you're not gonna need any money, because once you win, you get the prize and you get whatever you want for the rest of your life. Harkness is not deterred. He's essentially saying, like, even if I don't need the money, I think, he feels like he's doing something super important by writing a book about the long walk. So Harkness is fun. I really enjoy him. He will keep getting brought up throughout the novel, but that's his main defining character trait, is that he's a writer and he's going to try and write a book about this. Throughout these first few miles, as Garrity is meeting Harkness, he's having these conversations with McVrees and with Olson, with Art. He's also constantly keeping an eye on Stebbins. So like I said, Stebbins is someone who just intrigues Ray. He finds him weird and off-putting, and we do know that Stebbins, in terms of the pack formation, where we have the vanguard, the main group, Stebbins is always walking directly in the back by himself, never speaking to anybody. And periodically throughout the novel, we'll just constantly get Ray turning around and looking at him and just giving the reader an update on what Stebbins is doing. He's constantly fixating on what this kid has got going on. So after we get our little Stebbins update, literally just being like, hey, Stebbins is there, he's super weird anyway, right after that is where we get the first sighting of someone who will also be popping up again later. a boy named Percy's mom. So Percy's mom is a recurring character, is a recurring entity. So as they're walking, a woman runs out and tries to run into the street, screaming for Percy, asking where her son is. So we get the knowledge that this is one of the walkers' mothers. We never really meet Percy. We don't see him till later. But everyone's like giggling and laughing, like it's so embarrassing that Percy's mom is showing up. So she gets carted away by the soldiers. They essentially stop her and immediately haul her away because no one is allowed to interfere with the long walk. And the moment is very brief, but it's enough for now every kid is aware of like, hey, there's some kid named Percy and his mom's a little crazy. So once again, we're going to remember Percy's mom. Percy's mom is important. She will keep coming back, but this is the first time we get sight of her. Once that whole event happens and Percy's mom is hauled away by police, as they keep going, we then get the first rumor to start pouring through the rumor mill. So this is where they hear about a boy named Curly. They get word from up front that a boy named Curly has a Charlie horse and that he's not doing too good. They say that he's tripping, he's stumbling, and that he's having trouble continuing the walk due to the Charlie horse in his leg. So we do hear that he gets 3 warnings, and then we are able to catch sight of Curly, our main character, walks up, gets sight of which one is Curly, and now everyone's watching him. They're all watching him with like this bated breath because he has his 3 warnings, and if anything else happens, something's gonna happen to him. So he gets his 3 warnings. We're continuing on. Everyone's honed in. Garrity is watching this kid, and then the cramp hits again. He stops walking, and he is the first death of the novel. We see that the second he stops walking for that final time, the soldiers shoot him in the head. Now, this is described in graphic detail. We get that the head blows off, the blood and viscera are splattered all over the pavement, and Ray makes a note that, since they're not allowed to stop walking, they are walking in the blood and viscera and scraping their shoes into like the brains and matter spread along the pavement. It's described as being very brutal. And Ray is definitely horrified by this. He can't stop fixating on like the bloody shoe prints walking along the pavement. So from this point, the mood gets sombered a little bit. Up until now, they were all laughing, joking. They were literally just laughing and ribbing about Percy's mom and how ridiculous it was. And directly after that, they experienced the first graphic death of the novel. So now the mood is sombered, but overall, things are still looking okay. They were aware that people were going to die, but so far, spirits are still high. Stamina's still doing good. And in general, despite there being a death, they're still doing okay. There's definitely an added layer of like, things are getting real, but so far, nothing's too bad yet. Now, after that first death is where we then enter another town. We get the major making a brief appearance. He kind of shows up, salutes the troops, and then fucks off. And then also with the rumor mill, we get word coming back for the boys up front that, hey, someone has a radio. They're checking the weather. We hear it's going to rain soon. So this is now another element that's going to be coming up again and again is like things like the weather, that things that are going to be affecting how you walk. So they're always keeping an eye on what the temperature and what the weather is going to be. And with this first foretelling of rain, it's kind of like this first knowledge of like things are going to start getting harder as the day goes on. Now we continue forward, and this is where we get death number 2. There is a boy named Ewing, I don't know how you say that, but number 9 Ewing gets told that he has blisters. So of course the rumor mill starts. We get word hearing back that number 9 has really bad blisters. His feet are bleeding. Ooh, we think something might happen to him. So as soon as our main pack of characters hear the rumor and they're like, oh, they start talking amongst themselves. Literally like 2 seconds later, they hear the gunshot go off and Ewing dies within minutes of them hearing this rumor. So this is now bringing the death toll up to 2, and this is where it really starts setting in for our main character that, oh, this is like a bit dangerous. This isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. And this is where Garrity even starts thinking about the fact that like, hey, he's now been walking for around 10 miles now and he's getting a little tired and it's starting to make him nervous. And with the second death, that is the end of part 1. We are now going to be entering part 2 of the novel, and this part kicks off with rainfall. The change of weather has happened, rain is falling down the walkers, and the walk is definitely starting to get more difficult. People are starting to get a little more tired, it's cold, it's wet, and this is where Garrity starts to get this anxiety about some of his fellow walkers. So as it's raining, he notices Stebbins, because he's been keeping an eye on Stebbins this whole time. He sees Stebbins hunched forward in the rain, almost looking like he has a stomach cramp. And Garrity has this horrible fear that Stebbins might be having a cramp or something's wrong, and that he's going to die soon. He gets this horrible fear of Stebbins dying. And literally 2 seconds later, it is revealed that Stebbins is hunched over because he's protecting his last half of jelly sandwich, and that he is not injured and he's going to be fine. And Garrity immediately feels this relief, coupled with the fact that he feels a bit stupid. He feels almost dumb, like, why do I care so much about whether Stebbins lives or dies? And this is, I think, an important note of a change in Garrity's mindset, where a lot of this book is going to be following Garrity experiencing things and then having a change in mindset. As this walk goes on, he's going to evolve as a person. So he goes from not caring what happens to Stebbins and actively thinking like, he's weak, he's going to die first, to now no longer wanting to see Stebbins die and feeling a genuine panic when he thinks that there's something wrong with him. Also, now that it's raining and we're continuing on, we get our first mention of the bathroom situation. So we do see that they do not get bathroom breaks. Essentially, if they have to pee, we have boys turning around and peeing, walking backwards. And it is mentioned that if any of them have to take a shit, they're going to have to do it right there on the road in front of everybody else and in front of all the spectators. And it is treated as something super embarrassing and something that none of them want to do. Right around now is also where we're getting some of Ray's observations on the soldiers who are enforcing the rules. So the soldiers are following on these half-track vehicles, and Ray does make the observation that they are very, very stoic, completely blank-faced, completely wooden. And this is their description throughout the entire novel. They never react to anything. No matter what happens, the soldiers will never have any form of facial expression or emotional reaction. They never even speak. So as far as we're concerned, the soldiers are basically automatons. They are not characters. They are also more so like an entity or a presence. They are not actual human beings in this novel. Right around now is when we're about 25 miles in, and we see most of the boys are really starting to feel it, particularly Hank Olsen. So Hank Olsen mentions that his legs, like the muscles in his legs, are starting to feel weak and baggy. And he starts to get like this panicky feeling, like Olsen starts to get really scared, and they can all see it, that he's getting tired. So McVrees, ever like the cool-headed, calm McVrees, kind of brushes this off. He's like, hey Olsen, you're fine. My legs felt the same way a couple miles back. It'll pass. Relax, dude. And it does genuinely comfort him a little bit. He goes, oh, okay, like this is normal. I can get through this. And this is also where we get a first hint of like, McVrees caring more than he lets on that he should. So McVrees was very open about, this is a competition, I don't care about anybody. But when Olsen starts experiencing, fatigue and fear and anxiety, McVrees is one of the first ones to really be able to put him at ease. As they're going on and as they're having this conversation with Olsen, another boy, an unnamed character, dies. No reason is given. They just kind of speculate that he must have slowed down one too many times. All right, so Reese and Garrity, right after this death, do share a fun little conversation. It's going to be like on page 44 of the novel. So they have a conversation about being tired. Garrity asks McVrees, like, are you tired? Because I'm getting a little tired. And McVrees spouts off one of my favorite quotes, which is, just go on dancing with me like this forever, Garrity, and I'll never tire. We'll scrape our shoe on the stars and hang upside down from the moon. And then he blew Garrity a kiss and walked away. This is a really fun little peek into McVrees' character. Like I said, he's very sarcastic. He's very, chill and laid back, and he's very jokey throughout the book, which makes him super fun. He's definitely one of my favorite characters. This is a really telling interaction between him and Garrity, and it sets up the tone of their relationship going forward in the novel, is that McVrees is constantly making jokes and batting his eyes and just having fun ribbing Garrity, and Garrity's always the one who's always a little, confused, who's always a little more uncertain between these two. McVrees always comes off as being very sure of himself. Garrity's the one who's always naive and questioning and seeking out McVrees for comfort and for answers. Now, by this point, it's going to be around 4 o'clock the same day. So we started at 9 a.m. It's now about 4 p.m. The rain has finally stopped. And Garrity's kind of musing on the long walk. He's reminiscing, he's thinking, and we see that Garrity is searching for meaning in the walk. He's searching for the meaning of life, or the meaning of, what are they doing here? He's looking for a reason. Because we do know that Garrity, so far, doesn't know why he joined the Long Walk. He gets asked right out by one of the characters, like, so why are you doing this? And he just says, I don't know. He's searching for meaning through the Long Walk. And this is going to keep coming up with Garrity, is his quest for meaning. As Garrity's kind of ruminating on this and thinking about these questions, they then start up a discussion with the group of boys. So, I'm talking Olsen, Art, Garrity, McVrees. They start talking about dying and what they think will happen when they die. They talk about whether your life flashes before your eyes. And it's right after this conversation that McVrees pulls out Curtis cigarettes and decides to try his first smoke right there on the road. He's like, you know what? I'm here. I'm young. I'm dying. Let's try smoking a cigarette for the first time. And him and Garrity share a nice moment, have a nice friendship building moment where McVrees takes his first puff, immediately coughs like a little chump, and him and Garrity bond over the fact that cigarettes are ass and they don't really like them. Right after this is when we hear about a boy named Zuck. So Zuck, at some point, trips and falls, cuts open his leg, keeps walking. They then get word back through the grapevine that Zuck is still bleeding. Like, it wasn't a minor cut. He really gashed open his leg, and he is now bleeding out on the pavement. They can see, like, drops of blood in a trail as they're walking along behind Zuck. So eventually, we see that Zuck is bleeding out. He's literally losing too much blood, and he's starting to feel the effects of blood loss. And so he, in an act of final desperation, tries running, and he's running down the road, and the soldiers continue in their vehicle, and they follow him. And then he reaches a certain point where the soldiers just shoot him, and they all see him fall flat. So this death really triggers something in the boys. One of the boys, who's an unnamed character, he goes up and starts screaming at the soldiers, like yelling at them that this is wrong, that this is immoral, like, why are you doing this to us? So this is the first death to really trigger any resentful feelings in some of the boys. After Zuck's death, we then get a discussion between our main core cast about the purpose of money and religion. They start talking about, like, what use is money if God is a thing, if we're all gonna die, can you really take money into the gates of heaven? Like, our boys are getting very philosophical. They're really ruminating on life's big questions on this road. So as they're kind of talking about all this, Garrity goes on a rant about how, money doesn't really matter and that anyone can die at any moment. And if that's the case, then everyone should just take life one day at a time and be happy with what they have. Which, is a nice sentiment. I actually do kind of agree with it. And it's right after this discussion, this little talk they all have, that Olsen, poor Olsen, drops all his food. So they have food in like a big belt pouch. So while everyone's stopping and like eating and having lunch, Olsen accidentally drops his food pouch and loses all his food. And since they can't stop walking, he can't go back and grab it. So he kind of like continues walking along, making like these sad little comments, all pathetic. He's like, I'm really hungry, guys. Do one of you guys want to share your food with me? And I think Garrity is the only character who actually takes up some of his food and shares it with Olsen. So it's a nice moment for Garrity. We get to see that he is, he's kind, he's generous, he does care about the boys around him, and he is willing to help them out if need be. So right about now, though, so they're walking, they're talking, and they're all kind of getting bored. Because like this, there's literally nothing to do besides either talk to the guy next to you, walk, and ruminate on your own thoughts. So they're all getting bored, and they're all kind of counting down the miles until they hit the next town. Because to them, when they hit the next town, at least something exciting will happen. There'll be people, there'll be spectators, and it'll be, a little more entertaining than walking on this empty, deserted road. We do know that the next town that's going to be coming up is a town called Caribou. And as we're approaching like the few final miles before we enter this town, we do get one more death before we enter Caribou, is we do see that a kid has bad diarrhea and is literally shitting his pants. And because of that, he keeps trying to like walk and poop and can't do it. And he keeps accidentally stopping. So he gets his 3 warnings, stops one too many times, and the soldiers, of course, shoot him in the head. And Garrity just laments over the fact that, like, wow, this kid died from shitting. And he was like, that is the worst death. Like, that is the worst way to go. And he just feels so much embarrassment for this kid. And once again, it just worms its way into our main character's brain that he can die at any moment from anything. As they're approaching Caribou, we do get Garrity seeing a few spectators again. And this is after that kid dies of diarrhea. And now after seeing all that, after seeing all these gross, horrific deaths, Garrity starts to feel a little icky, a little uncomfortable with people cheering him on. He sees these spectators, and we do get the comment that he's like, I don't feel comfortable with that anymore. Like, it's kind of rubbing him the wrong way now. Which, once again, we're just going to make a note of, because this is a very different attitude than what he had at the beginning, which is when he saw people cheering his name, he got super excited. We're like 3 deaths in now, and he's no longer happy to be hearing people cheering his name. Now, by this point, the aches and pains are also really starting to build up in our core cast. They are now about 44 miles in, and, their legs hurt, their knees hurt, their muscles are sore. And Olsen especially. Olsen is the one who starts feeling the worst effects of walking first, before everyone else. He ends up having the shortest amount of stamina. So by the time we're hitting 44 miles, Olsen straight up wants to give up. He starts saying, like, you know what, guys? I can't do it. I'm not built for this. This was a mistake. Like, I can't keep doing this. I can't continue. But of course, there's no dropping out. It's walk or die. So unless Olsen decides to kill himself, he has to keep walking. And it is specifically McVries, again, who gets, like, angry at Olsen for wanting to give up. Like, he tells him off, and he starts trying to convince Olsen that he needs to keep going. And the way he phrases it, it comes off as very antagonistic, but you can tell that it comes from a place of concern. McVries is concerned for Olsen, and he's antagonizing him and egging him on and provoking a reaction out of Olsen to motivate him to keep walking. Because there is no giving up, there is no dropping out. If he stops walking, he will die, and McVries knows that. And so McVries is showing concern for these guys that he's become sort of friends with, and he's trying to get Olsen to keep going and to not give up, even if it does come off as very angry and as very, like, insulting. With Olsen being low in spirits, Garrity starts thinking about his girl back home. He has a girlfriend named Jan, and he starts thinking about her and thinking about, all the things he didn't get a chance to do with her before he left. The fear of mortality really setting in with these characters. So as that creeps into Garrity's mind, he's starting to think about his past, he's thinking about his mom and his girlfriend and the life he left behind, essentially. And while Garrity's ruminating on this, we then, as we continue, arrive at Caribou. This is the next big major town that they reach. And here is where we get a much larger crowd than compared with before. We have people with posters of the Major's face, lifting them up and down. And we see that the Major is being, worshipped like a god. We have pictures of his face, people with signs carrying, like, the Long Walkers' names. They have a very huge, uproarious crowd cheering them on. This is also where we get the first sight of reporters. So we have guys, with cameras and microphones walking alongside the edges trying to get interviews with the Long Walkers. And this is where we're getting a little bit more of, like, their celebrity status and how big and important this event is in this universe. Now that they're in Caribou, the only main thing that happens while they're there is that Percy's mom shows up again. We get Percy's mom in Caribou. She runs through, and she actually breaks out of a police holding her back. She's able to break through, and she almost makes it into the road. She gets so close to the point where the soldiers are aiming their guns at her, giving her warnings, telling her, like, we are going to shoot you. And right in the nick of time, a police officer is able to grab her, restrain her, and put her in the back of a car. So this is, and as we're watching this, we as the audience are watching as, like, this is a mother desperate to save her son. She's screaming for her child, and they restrain her and arrest her. And for the main character, Garrity, he's like, that was the highlight of my day. That was the only interesting thing to happen at all in Caribou. Like, for this group of teenage boys, they're just really bored, and to them, seeing Percy's mom is, like, a funny, jokey thing. That was the most entertaining part of their day, was seeing this crazy lady get restrained by police and arrested. At this point now, they're about 10 hours into the walk. So they start up at 9 a.m., they're about 10 hours in, and as they're going through Caribou, everyone's kind of starting to reach their turning point. They started off all super excited. They all started off thinking, like, wow, this is great. The Major's awesome. I'm so proud to be a part of this major event. By now, they're all starting to grumble and be like, man, fuck that guy. I hate the Major. Fuck him and his mom. I'm sick of being here. So this is when we're getting really the first rumblings of, like, the general attitude changing. And Garrity is now reflecting on the fact that he is one, scared of dying, and two, he's scared of seeing his friends die. Like we got a little bit earlier, he got nervous when he thought something was wrong with Stebbins. We're now getting him ruminating on the fact that he doesn't want to see any one of the guys he's gotten to know die yet. And he recognizes that this is a problem, that he should not be getting too attached. And he's getting this sense of like, ooh, things are going to get a lot harder since I'm getting so attached to the guys around me. Now, as they keep going through, they eventually walk through the town. They're leaving Caribou, and they start walking along a deserted road. So they're getting past the main town, and they're going through a long stretch where there's really nothing around them. And it's around here that we get word that a boy named Fenter slowed down one too many times and gets shot by the soldiers. They get word back like, hey, number 15 Fenter has died. And this is only of note because Garrity specifically mentions like, oh, I heard Fenter died and I was too tired to care. So this is where we're finally getting the first inklings of like deaths are not affecting Garrity as much as they did before. Like unless it's someone he knows, Garrity is now getting too exhausted to really care if someone dies. And now the deaths are coming more and more frequently. They have left Caribou by now. They're walking along the deserted road, and McVreeze starts making these like funny little jokes about being super horny. He's like making all these comments about how he's never been so horny in his entire life, and that he's just so like worked up right now. And this is also where he kind of hits on Garrity a little bit, where he's like, hey Garrity, like if you were to shave right now, I would have sex with you if you wanted. I only bring this up because one, it's hilarious and it plays to like the fun dynamic him and Garrity have, and two, McVreeze is making little comments and passes at Garrity all the time, and it's not done for no reason. It kind of does lead to something later in the book, which we will touch upon. But I just want to make a comment that McVreeze is constantly making like these flirty little jokes in Garrity's direction. This actually then leads to this bizarro discussion where all the boys are talking about, like they're just talking about sex and whether they've had it or not, and they start talking about necrophilia, and they just start getting into some weird discussions. And it's during this weird, gross conversation that we're having that Olsen kind of goes on this huge spiel about how love isn't real and how they're all idiots if they believe in love. And one, this is attesting to Olsen's state of mind right now. He is in a very hopeless place. He's going on a rant about how true love is fake and they're all going to die alone, which is very telling of where his headspace is at right now. Like I said, Olsen is the one who's experiencing the effects first. He's the first one to start getting tired, and he's the first one to start experiencing this psychological toll that the walk is going to take on everyone. So the long walk is as much a mental game as it is a physical game. So Olsen is, we are seeing the first one to be succumbing to some of that mental strain, and he's starting to, his brain is starting to go to dark places. He's starting to give into this despair, knowing that he's probably going to die. And once again, it's McVreeze who's kind of like goading him to keep on walking. He kind of is like, he's essentially telling Olsen like, hey, shut up, calm down, keep walking. As we're getting through to the late afternoon to the early evening, Garrity is also his mind's starting to go to some dark places. He's starting to ruminate on like bad childhood memories and some things that happened to him in his past that, are still affecting him now. Essentially, my boy is fighting demons, and those demons are possible repressed homosexuality? ? I bring this up because he starts thinking about some experience he had when he was a kid playing with another boy, and that they had both had boners while they were playing, and that his mom punished him for it. And this is important because Ray will keep coming back to the story and come back to what happened there, and it plays into like some of the psychological problems that Ray has. It's playing into like the repressed sexuality and the deep feelings of shame and guilt that our main character has around everything. Like a lot of times he's thinking about his girlfriend at home and how he wasn't ever able to have sex with her, and how that nags at him. He starts thinking about the fact that he doesn't really feel like a man because he never got to have sex with his girlfriend. Our main character is going to be thinking about this a lot. Like, everyone on the long walk is fighting demons, and our main character's demon just so happens to be possible bisexuality or homosexuality. It's then around 9 o'clock, and they're hitting about the 50-mile mark. So once they hit the 50-mile mark, they reach a humongous hill. Like, it's described as being so tall, there's still fog left over from the rain, and that it's so tall they can't see the top of the hill. They actually have no idea how high this hill goes. And it is a huge blow to morale. So all of our main characters, like, ooh, they lock in and they start walking up this huge hill. And specifically, Olsen is just falling into a pit of despair. Already, he has been losing his mind, both like losing his mind in terms of fear and the feeling like he's gonna die. And he already is so tired, way more tired than the rest of the cast. So they reach this hill and Olsen is just falling into the pit of despair. And McVries, once again, is the one who is like poking and prodding at him and goading him into continuing. He's like, he says, Olsen, I better see you dance up this hill. And Olsen is pissed off and is like yelling at everybody, saying, shut the fuck up, leave me alone. But once again, it works, and Olsen is able to continue going and is able to make it over this hill. This hill is one of their first really big challenges. While they're going up, they do get word back that a kid named Larson, we do see him. They're like, hey, something's happening with a kid named Larson, so they keep an eye out for him. They see him up ahead, so he just sits down. He literally sits down and says, hey, I'm tired. Can I just take a break for a second? Like, can I just have a break? And we can tell that he's like, losing his mind a little bit. Like, we all know that they can't stop walking. They're all aware of what the rules are. But Larson almost convinces himself, like, hey, like, no, it's okay. I'm just gonna take a little break. Like, I'll keep walking. Just let me sit down. And so he stops and he sits down and he starts begging with the soldiers to, like, just please let me have a break. Please let me just sit down, because he's so tired and the hill is so huge. So he sits down and he stays sitting, and they get first warning, second warning, third warning. And right after that third warning, he does, in a moment of panic, try to get up. He goes, like, no, please, I'll keep walking. But it's too late. He tries to get up, and he's sat down too long, and the soldiers shoot him. And he's I think the first kid to die on that massive hill. After that major event, after that very sad thing to watch, they managed to make it over the crest of the hill. And it's after witnessing this and after getting through their first, like, huge obstacle that they start talking about whether anyone amongst them have seen the end of a long walk. So like I said, the long walk is an endurance competition. So it starts off pretty good and ends very grisly. So the boys are discussing, they're like, hey, have any of you guys ever actually watched a long walk end? Have you ever actually seen, someone win it? And at first, every kid is like, no, I've never actually witnessed what the end of a long walk looks like. And this is where Stebbins, we get the first time Stebbins ever chimes into a conversation. This is the first time he ever speaks to any of our main characters. So Stebbins then chimes in for the first time, and he talks about that he has seen the end of a long walk in person. So he starts telling the story about how when he was a kid, his father, who he says is, his father is a soldier. He's like, now my father is part of the squads. He got me a front row seat to the end of a long walk. And so Stebbins goes into this horrible, graphic depiction of what the end looked like, that it was two competitors. They had been walking for days now, and that he describes as one of them had literally walked into his shoes, had fallen to pieces, and after that walked on socks, and after that is walking on bare feet, and that his feet were purple and bloody and mangled, and yet he still walked on them, that he's walking and screaming and walking. And that finally one of the competitors just drops and falls down dead. And that the other guy, who had also been walking with him, doesn't stop. They're like, everyone mobs him, the major comes in, they're all asking him, like, you win, you won, what do you want for your prize? And that he refused to speak to anyone. He just whispers to the dead body of the person of the second to last competitor. He goes and just starts talking to his dead body, and no one could hear what he told him. And Stebbins' description of this end of a long walk that he had seen is so graphic and so horrible that literally every boy who is listening to it is in distress, like in near tears over what he's telling them. And McVries specifically starts begging him. He's like, please stop talking. Like, I am begging you, like, not sardonically, not jokingly, like we've almost seen from him. McVries shows genuine, like, fear, genuine concern, and says, please stop talking. And everyone is just stunned into silence, and they are filled with dread. And then that's like the end of the chapter. That's how like this little scene ends, as Stebbins speaks for the first time and just ruins everyone's mood. And what Stebbins described is gonna stick with everyone for the rest of the novel. It's just gonna stick in their heads that this is the end that they're facing, that this is what they're walking towards, that it's not going to get any better. It is only going to get so much worse. Now, by this point, we are entering well into the first night. So it's around 10 o'clock, the sun has gone down, and it is now dark. Like, keep in mind, they are walking on a deserted road, so there's no light source. It is pure darkness. There's no flashlights, there's no street lights, and we do know that the soldiers who are watching them use radar and infrared, so they're watching them essentially with like night vision goggles. So the boys are now walking along in complete darkness. They can barely tell each other apart, and this is creating an extra layer right now. We're getting an extra layer of fear, is that now it's dark, and it's getting like a little more intense, because now when people die, you can't see who's dying. So people are dying with a little more frequency now, and you'll just hear a gunshot go off and a body fall, and that's it. This is also when word reaches the pack that a nearby bridge got washed away in the flash flood due to the rain earlier, and that they're not sure if it's been repaired. So there's rumors that they may have to pause the long walk to repair the bridge. And everyone, of course, is like cheering. They're like, yes, yes, we're gonna get a break. They're so excited. We're gonna put a pin in that. We're gonna get to this. Keep in mind, they're very excited right now. So we now get to around 11 p.m., and this is where we get a big confrontation between Barkovich and a guy named Rank. So like I said, it's nighttime, things are getting a little rougher, and we see that Barkovich antagonizes and is insulting a boy named Rank to the point that Rank turns around and takes a swing at him. He tries to punch Barkovich, pop in the mouth, because he's spouting shit. So Barkovich dodges the punch, and everyone is like, Rank, like, cool it off, don't let him bug you, like, we all hate that guy, keep walking. So Rank tries to walk off afterward. He starts walking faster, walking ahead to kind of get some distance between him and Barkovich. And Barkovich yells at him and starts insulting his mom. You know, he says like shit from The Exorcist, where he starts saying like, your mother sucks cocks in hell. And after Rank hears that, he turns around, runs at him, and takes a huge swing at his head. Like, he's going for the kill. He's going to take Barkovich out. Barkovich dodges, and Rank falls and stumbles to the side of the road. Now, by this point, both with the first swing and the second, and by running backwards with that second time, he's already gotten 2 warnings. He gets a 3rd warning after he falls, and then we see him, Rank is trying to get up and then slips one more time, and that's it. That was already his 3rd warning. He gets shot by the soldiers, and Rank is dead. Now, this is a very important scene only because after this, Barkovich goes from kind of an asshole that everyone has a distaste for to public enemy number 1. Everyone is going to remember this event, and they will never let him live it down. From this point forward, Barkovich is known as the killer. He's known as the murderer. Like, they all blame Barkovich specifically for killing this guy. Now, it's right after this whole fight goes on, that they witness all this, that they finally reach that bridge that was talked about. The bridge that they were all looking forward to, that they were all hoping, like, hey, we're going to reach this bridge, and we're going to get to stop walking for a few minutes while they fix it. Well, that is not the case. They all get horribly, soul-crushingly disappointed, because it turns out the soldiers have already been working on a makeshift bridge. They've already put, like, a large plank of wood down for the boys to walk across. And they're like, it's rink-a-dink, but it'll work. And so the walk continues, they don't get their break, and they're all just soul-crushingly disappointed, especially Olsen, of course. Olsen, who has just been, at this point, is already running on fumes, was so looking forward to getting a break, and they just face this soul-crushing disappointment when the bridge has already been partially repaired, and they just have to keep walking. This is also, as they're walking across this bridge, we get another important conversation between McVrees and with Garrity. So McVrees, gets right to the point and asks Garrity, like, hey, do you think you can win this? And Garrity, who is very honest, just says, no, I don't think I'm going to win this. Like, I thought maybe, Garrity originally went into this with so much confidence, but by this point he says, no, I really don't think I can do this. And then he turns the question back on McVrees as well. He says, well, what about you? Do you think you can win the long walk? And this is where we get a really great monologue from McVrees. Because essentially he says, up until around 9 p.m. tonight, I really thought I could do this, but this is where we get a rumination from McVrees about, what the long walk is. He starts talking about how he went into this thinking this was a physical sport. He's like, I thought this was a competition where your endurance and your strength and stamina were what were going to decide who the winner was. So he went into this genuinely thinking he could win it because he's like, I'm strong, I'm built, I can do this. But what he didn't take into account was the psychological toll. So McVrees, tells Garrity and is also telling the audience, telling the reader, that this is not a physical game, this is a mental game. He's like, this is a walk or die scenario. So he's essentially saying that even someone who's physically weak, if pushed enough mentally, could keep walking far past their physical limitations. So he's saying that essentially he's like, physically I can do this walk, but mentally, no. He's like, I mentally cannot handle this. Like, I have already accepted the fact that I am not gonna win this and I'm probably gonna die. So this is a very heartfelt exchange between him and Garrity, because it's McVrees, not just Garrity admitting that he thinks he's gonna die, but McVrees also saying in return, like, I don't think I can do this. I also think that I am going to die here. And this feeling, these thoughts about, that there's no way that they can win this, hang over them for the rest of the novel. They're constantly thinking about the fact that they don't believe that either one of them can actually make it through this walk. But at the tail end of this monologue, which I will say is great, it's a great overall McVrees quote, and it really gets to the heart of what the long walk is. Like I said, it is a mental challenge, not a physical challenge. But right at the tail end, McVrees says, he's like, I know I can't win this, but I know for sure I can outlast Barkovich. Because like we saw, Barkovich is now a known killer and murderer. They all fucking hate him. He makes a vow. He's like, Garrity, I promise I'm gonna outlast Barkovich. And that's like McVrees' motivation going forward, is he's gonna outwalk Barkovich, and he can't die until Barkovich dies. Once we get past the bridge, we get past this conversation with McVrees, we are now into the late night stages. So this is where we're getting to like 1, 2, 3 a.m. And this is where that type of late night psychological toll is getting more drastic. Like, it's dark, it's spooky, they're walking through like a wooded area, so some of the boys are getting creeped out. And, they can't stop walking to rest. They're not allowed to sleep, so they're all getting really, really tired. And they start our main character starts not sleeping, but kind of nodding off as he walks. So here is where he starts once again going through like a mental spiral, thinking about what's gonna happen, if he's gonna live or die, and he starts thinking about, dark memories from his childhood. He thinks about the first kid he ever actually saw die, not on the long walk, but he thinks about a kid that was nicknamed Freaky D'Alicio. I bring this up because he will also get brought up again and again, where Ray has memories of a kid named Freaky D'Alicio who got hit by a car, and he was the first dead body that our main character Ray ever saw. So this is another dark childhood memory that, as he's walking and thinking and ruminating on the long walk, will keep popping up again and again. Our main group of guys make it through that first night, and we see that dawn finally breaks and all their spirits immediately raise. I will admit, the book's getting a little dark as the night goes on. Ray is thinking more and more dark, morbid thoughts, and he's kind of spiraling, and they're not chit-chatting, they're not having fun anymore. It's dark, it's spooky, and they're all super tired. So finally, the next morning begins, dawn breaks, and immediately they all perk back up. They're all like, hey, we made it through the first night, we're alive. Like I said, people are dying throughout the night, and you don't get to see who it is. So after the sun rises, they kind of take stock. They look around and go, okay, Art is still here. McVrees is still here. Hank Olson's still here. So Garrity sees that all of his friends, all the people he's gotten to know, are still alive. And he gets this second wind, this little boost of the sun is out, I made it the first night, and my people are okay. By this point, we get our mile marker, we're about 80 miles in. And this is also where I'm gonna go ahead and consider this the start of day 2. I know technically the walk started at 9 a.m. and right now we're still in the really early hours, but this is now essentially the start of the next day. We're on day 2. And they're now in much higher spirits. They're making jokes, they're chit-chatting and talking again. And they start making this joke about the Major. Because at this point, they're all, the Major is no longer a celebrity. They all kind of hate the guy. So they're making jokes about the Major fucking his mom. And they're talking, they're laughing, they're having a ball, making fun of the Major. And McVrees suddenly, in the middle of laughing with these guys, turns and looks at the soldiers, and he starts losing it. He starts saying oh, what, is that funny to you? What, you like that? And he starts freaking out going off on the soldiers, and to the point that he stops walking. He runs up to like the half-track vehicle that they were riding on, stops walking, starts getting warnings, and just starts screaming at them. Like McVreeze starts giving into this bit of hysteria. At this point, all the other boys have walked past him, and they're all getting freaked out because obviously McVreeze has lost his mind, and he's gonna buy a ticket right now. And this is when we get Ray, who, like, up until this point, McVreeze and Ray have been the two closest. So Ray turns back and runs to McVreeze. He stops walking to go and get to his friend. He grabs McVreeze and he starts pulling on him. He starts saying, like, come on, you gotta keep walking, we gotta keep going. And so it's Ray who is able to snap McVreeze out of this hysteria and convince him to keep walking. So he does, he like gives a little like, fine, whatever, let's go, and keeps walking. And Ray saves McVreeze's life. And he can recognize it. Like, McVreeze acts very put out, very like, almost annoyed that Ray saved his life, but we do see that he is grateful. And this is also where we're getting, like I said, a little more into McVreeze's mindset. Even though previously McVreeze had been portrayed as a lot more, not optimistic, but a lot less serious than like Ray and the others, we see that he's also getting really affected by this. He starts, you know, the somber mood and the dark thoughts are really starting to affect McVreeze as well. So after saving McVreeze and they continue the walk, we then get Harkness has a little minor event. So Harkness gets a cramp in his foot, and immediately he starts going to Ray because he's panicking. He's like, hey, Ray, something's wrong. He's like, my foot hurts, it's cramping. I don't know if I can work it out. I don't know if I can walk on it. And Ray is essentially feeling the sense of like helplessness. He's like, I can't help you. I don't know what I can do about that. So he just tells Harkness, like, you have to handle this yourself. Like, work the cramp out and then keep going. You can do this. You can keep walking. Harkness ends up having to stop walking for a bit. He has to stop walking to work the cramp out. He gets 3 warnings, but right in the nick of time, he manages to get back up and keep walking forward. This is also where we get some mention of that there's kids watching this portion. There's a bunch of spectators, and some of them are little kids. They mention it's a small group of little leaguers are also watching this, and they're watching Harkness get his 3 warnings, and they're watching with like this rapt attention, really hoping to see Harkness get shot. And then he does it, and they mention like, oh, all the little boys went, aw, and they all got really disappointed and then walked away. And this is just, once again, giving us little context clues, little tidbits of this world that even kids are morbidly fascinated and want to watch The Long Walk, and that the spectators are like bloodthirsty. They're excited to see someone die. They're there for entertainment, and they're there to see people get killed. After this event with Harkness, we do get that after he survives, he makes it, he's like, Harkness then is like running. He's so scared of getting that last warning that he's now hiking up forward and starts walking with the vanguard. And this is where we end then that chapter and we get to the start of the next. Now this next starting chapter kicks off with one of my personal favorite characters, Scram. This is where we get introduced to a boy named Scram. We don't get an exact age for him, but we can assume he's probably around 17, only because we get introduced to Scram as being the only kid on the Long Walk who is married. So he kind of goes into, they start asking him about it, and he goes into the story about how he dropped out of school at like 14, and that he married his high school sweetheart. He's like, yep, we got married, I got, a job at a factory, and now she's pregnant and expecting their first child, and he's doing the Long Walk so that his kid will never need money and so that his kid can go to college. It's actually very sweet. I really like Scram. His wife's name is Kathy, and he says, I'm doing this for her. He's like, I may be dumb, but my wife Kathy is so smart. Our kid's gonna be so smart, and he's gonna be able to go to college and make something of himself because I'm gonna win this. So he is really the first Long Walk character that we get who is walking for a reason. Everyone else more so is doing this for the glory or is doing this for an unknown motivation, like Ray, who doesn't really know why he's in this. Scram is the first character we get who is really walking for a strong, motivating reason. He is walking to provide for his future child, which once again is super weird to the other competitors because this is a competition for boys between the ages of 13 to 17. 18 is the cutoff age. So it's utterly bizarre that one of them is actually married and about to be a dad. And it's while they're having this conversation with Scram that Scram sort of gives them all a little insight. He kind of gives a little analysis of the guys. They start asking him, like, why do you think you're gonna win this? Like, why do you think you of all these guys are gonna actually win? And he comes out and says, like, well, I have a reason to be here. Like, no one else here has a good reason to do the long walk. I'm doing this, like, he's like, everyone here right now is walking out of fear of dying. They're walking away from something. He says, I'm walking towards something. I'm walking toward the future, towards my family. Like, he's walking for the sake of others. And so this, puts a really big seed of doubt in Garrity, who, at the beginning felt pretty confident, and by this point already feels like he's not cut out for this. Now seeing Scram, who is this guy who is extremely physically fit and psychologically has no problems walking for hours on end. Scram is a guy who's very comfortable with his own thoughts and is walking optimistically. He is walking, with love in his heart, with thoughts of his wife and his unborn child. Like, he is walking with hope. Whereas the rest of them are all already, tired and sad and just want to go home. After all this conversation, when we get introduced to Scram, it's right around here, it's about 7 a.m. that we see a group of girls standing next to a Jeep. So the group of girls are in a Jeep, they're cheering everybody on, they got their signs going, and a boy named Gribble, who we haven't met up until this point, Gribble runs forward and essentially tries to dry hump one of these girls. And she's super into it. She's hooking her legs around his waist, making out with him. And he gets his 3 warnings and then has to run back out into the street. And we see that Gribble, after he gets 3 warnings, has to continue walking, has a complete breakdown, starts screaming and crying about how he didn't get to finish and that he can't do this. And then he just falls to his knees and gets shot and dies. He literally died from his own horniness. He died from his own desire to get laid. He was so in hysterics over the fact that he couldn't finish with this girl that he just screams, cries, falls to his knees, and then gets shot in the head. Which is, once again, very graphic and definitely has a strong effect on our main character, especially after he sees that the girls who were in the Jeep don't care at all. They don't care one bit that they inadvertently caused this guy to die. Technically, it wasn't their fault. He chose to do that. But they at no point looks shocked or horrified by this. No, we can tell that he's nope, they just got back into their car and are laughing and giggling amongst themselves. And this is really starting to plant those seeds of resentment in Garrity towards the spectators, towards the people who are watching them suffer and die. We're going to check back in on Olsen now. So once again, Olsen is the first one to really start experiencing the psychological and physical toll of the walk. So we get to check in back with Olsen, where Garrity looks at him and we see that he is just decaying more and more. We see that he's been silent for the past 2 hours. He's not talking to anyone. And McVries makes a little comment. He's like, yeah, by now Olsen is reaching the point where he's wishing he'll die. He's starting to get to the point where he's so tired, he would rather be dead than keep going. After checking with Olsen, we also then get a little check-in with Scram. So it's at this point that Scram starts to sneeze and starts to sound a little congested. And someone just makes a comment. I think it's Garrity, who's just like, hey, you okay, man? He goes, yeah, it's okay. It's just allergies. I get allergies every spring. We're going to put a pin in that. That's going to come up again later. After we get that little conversation with Scram, that we get word about Harkness, who previously had gotten those 3 warnings after the cramp in his foot. We get word that Harkness has died. We didn't actually see the death, but word comes back that he's like, oh yeah, Harkness was walking up ahead. He just slowed down. He didn't make it. He got the 1 too many warnings. He slowed down 1 too many times, and he got shot. And this affects Garrity mainly because this was the first person he considered a friend to die. And so to Garrity, this kind of breaks a little psychological wall he had where he had been, things are bad, but at least everyone he knew, all the guys that he had cared about and he had become friends with, they were all okay. They all made it through the first night and they were all doing okay. Harkness marks the first person in his inner circle to die. By now, we're getting close to the 100-mile mark, and it's around 8 a.m. of this day 2. So it's around here that Garrity interrupts a conversation that had been going on between McVries and Baker to mention that Percy, the guy with the mom, he notices that Percy is acting a little weird. He's shifty-eyed, he's nervous, he keeps glancing back at the soldiers. They look like they're not paying very close attention to the walkers right now. And Percy starts walking closer and closer away from the main group to the side of the road. So Garrity makes this observation, and all of our main group of boys lock in and they kind of hone in on Percy, and they watch him as over the course of, let's say, an hour or so, he just walks further and further to the side. And then eventually, Percy tries to make a run for it. And I will say tries to, because the second Percy's foot steps off the side of the road and he enters the shoulder, he's immediately gunned down. The entire time they were all really hyping him up, thinking like, the soldiers aren't looking at him. He's so inconspicuous, he might be able to make it out into the woods, at least for a little bit before they track him down. Apparently, with their sophisticated radar and their technology, they were not fooled for even a second. The second he steps off the side of the road, he gets gunned down. It is brutal. And the only thing Garrity can really think of is Percy's mom. So beforehand, Percy's mom had been a joke, an ongoing gag with the other boys. They thought it was so funny that this crazy lady keeps running out into the street trying to find her son. And now Garrity is treating it very seriously, where he's almost angry with Percy. Like, how dare you? How could you die knowing that your mom loves you and cares about you that much? Knowing that this woman who birthed you has been hunting you down, trying to find her son, trying to save her son. And he says he has the audacity to die on her. This is where we really get the culmination of what that plot point was about. We keep seeing Percy's mom, and now the boys have to deal with the fallout of Percy's death. And here it's also mentioned, because we never really got to know Percy at all, but one of the boys, I believe it's Baker, makes an observation that Percy is extremely young. He's one of the youngest contestants there. They mentioned that he's maybe 14, and if that, barely. He's most likely 13 years old. And that all the more so, and it's not just the way he died and the fact that he died trying to escape, it's the fact that he was also one of the youngest members who still had a mom who was so dedicated to finding him and dedicated to trying to save him from this. It really is something very sad, and it does affect Garrity a lot. After the event with Percy, we get a little weather update. It is going to be a hot one today. So as with the previous day, they had rain. Now it's mentioned that even by 8 o'clock, it is starting to get really warm, and it's only going to get hotter as the day goes on. So with that in the mind, the boys continue forward, and they go past a truck stop with some trucks who have been pulled off the side of the road, forced to clear the road to make way until the walk and the soldiers completely pass them by. And here is where a group of truckers flip off the boys because they're pissed that they have to halt their route for the long walk to go by. And it brings up a very important conversation with Garrity. Garrity mentions he feels sympathy for these truck drivers. He mentions that his dad was a truck driver and he knows what kind of pressure they're under to meet certain quotas. And of course, this gets people asking about his dad. They're like, oh, well, you use past tense. Is your dad not in the picture anymore? And this gets Garrity to open up about the fact that his dad got squatted, that he got squatted when he was young, and he hasn't seen him since. So the boys mostly are very empathetic towards Garrity. They give him the, I'm sorry, oh, that must be rough. The only character to really give Garrity a hard time is Collie Parker. So, brief pause, we're going to talk about Collie Parker. Collie Parker is a character who has only up until this point been very, very briefly mentioned for the first half of the novel. It's only now that we're getting into the second half of the book that we're going to get more mention of him. So now we'll go ahead and give you a brief rundown on Collie Parker. So he's a character that we know is from the state of Illinois. So far, the only character trait we had seen of him up until this point is that he's abrasive, very rude, a bit of a dick, not to the same extent as Barkovich is, but he's just kind of an asshole. And throughout the book, the only comments we ever get from him are the fact that he hates the state of Maine. And he's constantly making fun of Garrity for being from Maine. He thinks that the weather's shit. He calls it like a hick countryside. So Collie Parker, up until this point, has been a very minor character. And here, when he learns that Garrity's dad had been taken by the squads, he calls his father an idiot. He says only idiots get squatted. And Garrity just shamefully kind of turns away and almost seems to agree with him. He doesn't speak up. He doesn't try to defend himself or his dad. And we see that Garrity, in his own internal thoughts, agrees with Collie Parker. He does think that his dad was an idiot for being reckless and, being so open about his political opinions when he was well aware what would happen to him if he ever got reported. So when this happens, though, when Collie Parker insults Garrity's father and he does nothing about it, it is McVrees who comes to Garrity's defense. McVrees tells Collie Parker, he gets in his face and says, shut up. Tells him, keep going, keep walking, shut up. And once again, this is McVrees showing how much he cares about Garrity, where even if Garrity himself feels this shame about his dad, and McVreeze is not gonna let anyone else insult his friend like that. And Collie Parker, in a moment of like humanity, he does apologize to Garrity. He says, you know what? I don't think before I speak. I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry about that. They end that moment on peaceful terms, and it's a really nice scene that shows moments of humanity with these guys, where even though Collie Parker and Garrity are not friends, they were still able to have this moment of understanding, where even Collie Parker realizes, hey, you know what? I should have a little empathy for you. I'm sorry about that, man. My bad. And this is also a really nice look with McVreeze and how close he's gotten to Garrity and how he's the first one to come to Garrity's defense. It's also right after we have this interaction where Garrity then starts reminiscing about the day his father was taken. So this is the most backstory we're really going to get about this. He goes into detail that his dad had gotten a job driving government trucks, and he let his political views be known. And someone at his workplace reported him, called, they call it like the party tip line. Someone reported him to the party tip line, and that one morning when Garrity was a child, soldiers knocked on his front door, they arrested his father, and he's never seen him again. He says that when that happened, he turned to his mom and asked her, well, where is dad going? What's going to happen to him? And his mom slapped him so hard his mouth started bleeding. And we see that she just had a complete breakdown after that. So, one very, very rough start for Garrity. This is just a very sad moment that we share with Garrity, seeing, you know, how his father being taken affected him and how it affected his relationship with his mom. Previously, we had seen Garrity's mom as being generally very caring. She obviously cared about her son, and she was very worried about him going into the long walk. But this is where we get some of Garrity's complex and hot and cold feelings with his mother. We do see that he cares about her, but he holds a lot of resentment towards her for how she handled his father leaving and how she handled other things that happened when he was growing up. After Garrity opens up about his past, Art Baker opens up a little bit about himself as well. Now that they've all kind of shared a very humanizing, very empathetic moment, Art opens up about being a Knight Rider for 3 years. So as far as I could tell, I actually kind of Googled this. A Knight Rider was an actual thing in the South, like post the Civil War, where it was groups of like young men in masks running around and terrorizing people. So Art Baker mentions that when he was 12 years old, like a kid, he joined the Knight Riders. I can assume like joined this gang that would just go out and terrorize people at night in masks. And everyone's shocked because, like I said, Art Baker up until this point is such a nice, calm, very soft-spoken guy. He is the last person you would expect to be part of like a terrorist group. And they even mentioned like they said that's a squatting offense. Like you could get in serious trouble for what Art Baker was doing at 12 years old. And he says that he knew, he just didn't care at the time. You know, he was young and rebellious. And he is deeply ashamed of his past because the reason why he left the Knight Riders is because they burnt a cross on a black man's lawn. They committed a racist hate crime. And after that, Art just really looked at himself and said, like, what am I doing? I don't agree with this. I don't agree with these views. So we see that Art feels a deep amount of shame and regret about his past actions. And that he said after that night when they burnt that cross, he's like, I left, I never looked back, I never went back to doing it. And this is just a really nice moment from Art where we see some of his past and some of what has led him to the person he is now. Because Art is a very kind, very empathetic person. And we can see that maybe he wasn't always like that and has had things in his past that have caused him to grow as a person. So a really nice insight into Art as a character. Now I'm going to take a moment to introduce two other boys who previously were very briefly mentioned, but now that we're getting to the second half of the book, are going to start popping up more and more. So we have Pearson and we have Abraham. Pearson, the defining like character trait we can get for him right off the bat is that he has been keeping track of every boy who dies with pennies. He has 100 pennies in one pocket, and every time someone dies, he takes a penny and moves it to the other, so he can keep track of how many people have passed away. And that's the little tidbit we get about Pearson so far. The second character who I'm going to be introducing now is Abraham. Abraham is another guy who has been mentioned very briefly in the past, but now is going to start appearing and having a bigger role as the story goes forward. Abraham, I believe, is a redheaded boy. And him and Collie Parker get along very well. So these two are frequently seen talking together. Now, after all the boys have their sharing circle and kind of open up about their past, McVrees and Garrity have a conversation about the spectators. Garrity, by this point, is thoroughly disgusted by them. He thinks of them almost like as animals. And McVrees makes the observation that he essentially is saying, like, don't think you're better than them. You were exactly like them before you started this long walk. Don't think just because we are contestants and they're the spectators that we're any different from them. He talks about how what they're doing now is human nature, that people have always been fascinated by death. They've always been fascinated by watching the suffering of others. He says that, food tastes better, sex feels better when you know you're going to die, when you're reminded of your mortality. So they watch these boys die to feel better about their own lives. And he tells Garrity, like, up until, before, when you were growing up, you were just as demented, just as rabid to watch something happen at the long walk. Like we got in the previous few chapters where Garrity mentions watching a long walk as a kid and him being just as excited to see someone die. Garrity is expressing that he feels like the other people are animals and that they are the only real human beings, the competitors in this long walk. And McVrees essentially puts him in his place a bit and says, hey, you are no different from them. You know better now, but the only reason you know better is because now you're the one who's dying. We're now later into the morning and the boys get a restock of their food supply. So everyone's essentially eating their breakfast, enjoying the hell out of it. They have been starving up until this point. And Garrity, in an act of just willpower, he decides that rather than ravenously scarfing down the food right now, he's gonna wait at least 30 minutes. He's gonna give it some time just to make his food last a little longer and to flex an act of willpower. And McVrees, at first asks him, like, why are you not eating? He takes notice of this, and when Garrity tells him what his plan is, that he's essentially trying to enforce his willpower, McVrees makes a very nice observation. He gives Garrity a very nice compliment. He says, hey, you know what? If I had $1, he's like, mind you, just $1, I think I would bet it all on you. He's like, I think you have a chance of actually winning this. So previously, Garrity had expressed that he didn't think he could actually survive the long walk. He's just trying not to die now. But McVrees, gives him this words of encouragement, tells him, hey, I do think you can do this. Like, if I were to bet my money, I would bet it all on you. And it's a really nice scene between them. So by now we are hitting the official 100-mile mark. Before they were approaching it, they were at around the 90 miles. They now, as soon as they hit the 100-mile mark, it is a huge mile marker in terms of the competition. So there is a ginormous crowd. There is a banner hanging over the street marking the 100th mile. And by this point, the crowd is enormous, far larger than what we had seen previously. And here is where they are described as acting like animals. The book goes into a lot of detail of how the facial expressions, how they're acting, how people in the crowd are behaving, and that they are almost inhuman. They are acting like wild animals, screaming and shouting and throwing things and climbing on top of each other to get a good view of the long walk. But while they're going through this humongous crowd, everyone's cheering their names, Collie Parker and a few of the other boys start insulting people. Like, they're yelling at people's faces saying, like, hey, how are you doing? Fuck you too, fuck you and your mom. They're just taking the piss out of it, having fun. While all these people are out here cheering their names, they're insulting all of them. And when Garrity hears this, he starts to give in to this hysterical laughter. Not just he finds it funny, not just laughing, he starts laughing hysterically to the point that he can no longer walk. He can't stop laughing. His gut hurts. He's hunched over. He's almost falling to the ground from how hard he is laughing. Tears are running down Garrity's face. Garrity is in danger. He gets his first warning, he gets his second warning, and he cannot collect himself. He cannot get it together. He is about to die from laughing. And this is where McVrees, who had already gone ahead past Garrity, turns around and runs back for his friend. He grabs Garrity, he picks him up, and he slaps sense into him. He literally slaps him twice across the face to get him to stop laughing. And from there, pulls him forward and gets Garrity walking again before he can get shot. And this is McVrees returning the favor. Garrity had saved his life, and McVrees comes back And despite what he had said before, despite saying that if you fall down, I will not pick you up, McVrees saves Garrity's life. And this, really solidifies just how close these two have become over the course of this competition. After McVrees saves Garrity, Olsen, who had watched this whole thing happen, starts yelling obscenities at McVrees. He starts screaming, "How could you do that? How could you prevent one more person from dying, thus making the walk last longer?" Like, Olsen, who we have seen has been mentally and physically decaying, is at this point nearly insane. He is, even though McVrees and Garrity are his friends, he is so exhausted and he has lost so much of himself that he is actually genuinely angry that McVrees would stop a fellow competitor from dying. McVrees kind of calms him down. He essentially says, get off my dick. Garrity saved my life, I saved his life, we are even. McVrees really tries to brush the whole event off as, he's like, I'm just repaying a debt, that's it. And we can see that he's a little ticked off. He almost seems he's angry with himself for going back on his own word. So he leaves, after Garrity starts walking again, McVrees walks off. He leaves without him and starts walking ahead. Specifically starts walking directly behind Barkovich. Like we said, McVrees is out here solely to outlast Barkovich, so after he leaves Garrity in a huff, he goes and is just walking behind Barkovich very closely, hurling insults at him as they continue. So right now, Garrity is walking by himself, and he realizes that he doesn't really have anyone to talk to right now. And who does he seek out but Stebbins? Garrity slowly, cuts back on his speed, not enough to get a warning, but he slowly edges towards the back of the pack until he's walking next to Stebbins. And this is where we get the beginning of the Stebbins and Garrity dynamic. So Stebbins, up until this point, is essentially just like a ghost. He's a shadow. He's just this specter that briefly pops up, and we don't really see Garrity and him interact very much. Now, Garrity seeks out Stebbins to talk to him, to ask him some questions. So when he goes to Stebbins, he mentions that, hey, you seem to know more about the Long Walk than anyone else. So he starts asking Stebbins just some things that have been on his mind. The first thing he asks him is about the crowds. He says, hey, so this crowd's pretty big, yes, but it's not Super Bowl levels. It's not stadiums full of people. What gives? When does the crowd start getting overwhelming? And Stebbins initially just gives very cryptic, very weird answers. This man talks in riddles. And eventually, though, he tells Garrity that the crowds, one, are discouraged from swarming and overwhelming the competitors this early in the walk. He's like, the crowds will only show up in full force when we get to the end. So he's like, essentially, if you make it to the end, that is when you're going to see how big these crowds can get and how ravenous these people can get. But Garrity, after this conversation, he tells Stebbins that he acts like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland. And Stebbins, in classic Stebbins fashion, cannot answer like a normal human being. He says, I'm not the caterpillar, I'm the rabbit. And Garrity is so weirded out by him, he goes, wow, that's weird, okay, I'm done talking to you now. He literally says, I can only take you in small doses, and then walks forward ahead and starts seeking out McVrees. Garrity is worried that McVrees is angry with him, that he's angry that he had to go and save Garrity's life, that Garrity couldn't take care of himself. So he approaches McVrees, who's once again walking right behind Barkovich. So they're standing in a line of three. You get Barkovich, McVrees, Garrity. And so Garrity kind of starts trying to say hey, are you mad at me? And McVrees, I love McVrees. After insulting Barkovich again, turns around and says hey, Garrity, I'm not mad at you. Trust me, he's we're okay, we're fine. But I want to emphasize that now, if you fall, I will not pick you up. He's I've repaid my debt, we've saved each other's lives, but now you are on your own going forward. Put a pin in that. Everyone remember this. McVrees, for the second time, is saying, I will not save your life, Garrity, we're even. We're competitors. I am not going to help you out going forward. Sure, McVrees, sure. It's during this conversation that they see a redheaded kid who has now stopped walking in the middle of the road. And this is once again with the huge specters, with the huge crowd. And he starts begging the soldiers to let him rest. Very similar to some of the characters we had seen previously. He's begging to let them rest, but rather than just sitting down and dying, he attempts to climb the side of the half-track the soldiers are standing on. He starts climbing up the side of it, begging and pleading to please just let him rest. Please let him rest. So the soldier slams the butt of his gun down on the kid's hand so that he's forced to let go. And then the half-track runs over the kid's legs, crushing and mangling them. And keep in mind, he is still alive. This unnamed boy is still alive and is now screaming, brutally screaming. And Garrity, McVries, and all of the other characters are watching this horrifying scene as his legs and feet get mangled under the half track, and that he is still alive and he's still screaming. So these soldiers give him his first warning, his second warning. They act like nothing is wrong. They act like he can still get up and keep walking. So they give, all right, number 15, first warning, number 15, second warning. And the kid is clearly, he will never be able to walk again. He is screaming out in agony, and after his third warning, they finally put him out of his misery and shoot him in the head. And the scene is just so grotesque and so traumatizing that Garrity almost, once again, falls into hysteria. Like, where before he started hysterically laughing, now he's getting to the point where he might start crying hysterically. He's traumatized by this, like he almost can't handle it. McVries, remember how I said put a pin in that? McVries says that he wasn't gonna help Garrity anymore, that he's on his own, he won't save him. So McVries is the one who is able to get Garrity out of his hysterics. He's able to talk him through it, he's able to talk him through his panic. He says, Garrity, tell me about your girl at home. You have a girlfriend, right? Tell me about her. What do you like about her? What are you gonna do once you win the long walk? Like, what are you gonna do with her? You gonna start a family? How many kids are you gonna have? And so McVries, in like this, such a touching moment of like care and compassion, is able to get Garrity's mind onto something else. He's able to get him to stop looking at the mangled corpse and to focus on him and start talking about, you know, his girlfriend, his mom. He's able to start getting him out of his head and out of the hysteria that's threatening to consume him. And it is during this conversation with McVries and Garrity where he is still, you know, coaxing Garrity along and getting him to, you know, mentally recover from what they just saw. McVries decides to open up himself. He says, hey Garrity, you want to know how I got this scar? And this is where we finally get McVries' backstory. Now, McVries, before the events of the novel, apparently had been completely head over heels in love with a girl. Her name was Priscilla. So he says that no strict timetable, but sometime before the events of the walk, him and Priscilla had both moved out of their homes and started working at the same pajama making factory. They work at this factory and they're both living with groups of roommates in their own separate apartments. So he's living with a group of boys, she's living with a group of girls, and they had moved out in an effort to gain a little independence, you know, to let their love blossom. So he talks about how he was just completely head over heels in love with this woman, Priscilla. And after they move out, he finally loses his virginity to her, and he mentions, in this little tidbit, he mentions that, oh, she didn't really want to have sex, but she did it to make me happy. So we're kind of getting some contextual clues on their relationship, on the dynamic that they had. So Priscilla, as far as we can tell, is very much in love with McVries as well up until this point. They start working at the pajama factory, and McVries just talks about how much he hated it. He said it was a shit job, it was awful, my coworkers hated me, and he was just having a terrible time. Priscilla, on the other hand, had apparently kind of found her stride at this new job. It was her job to sew the buttons onto the shirts of these pajamas, and she was very good at it. She was good at her job, she was friends with her coworkers, and apparently they got a small amount of commission for every shirt that they finished. So she was actually making really good money because she was so good at what she did. Whereas McVries was, he said that he was slow, he was clumsy, he wasn't good at his portion in the factory, and he was constantly fucking up the other people around him. So everyone automatically would just, you know, people started beating him up, he was constantly getting into fights, and he's just utterly miserable. The only reason he's doing this now is because, you know, well, me and Priscilla are both here, I'm doing this with her. As Priscilla gets more and more successful at this factory, McVries starts to get more resentful of her. He starts to resent the fact that she is making so much money and that she is happy and thriving, and he's starting to feel like a failure. He feels like he doesn't feel like a man anymore because his girlfriend is making more money than him and is so much more successful and happy and thriving in this new environment. So McVries starts to take it out on her. He says he got angrier, he stopped even wanting to have sex with her because of how resentful he is. He says that, like, you can't understand the pain of being in competition with your own girlfriend. So eventually, in an act of desperation, because he feels like she's slipping through his fingers, that she is moving beyond him, he asks her to marry him. And keep in mind, McVrees at this point in the novel, we can assume is either 16 or 17. So he must have been at most 15 when he asked to marry her. And of course she says no. She says, we can't, we're too young, like how are we gonna support ourselves? I won't marry you. And for McVrees, this is pretty much the last straw. This to him confirms everything he had been thinking, that she doesn't like him anymore, she doesn't respect him, she is moving beyond him, and it really solidifies that he feels like an absolute failure. So after this, he confronts Priscilla at her apartment. He mentions that her roommates were gone, it's just the two of them, and he confronts her. He calls her like a money-hungry bitch. He's like, you are a conniving, money-hungry bitch, and you don't care about me, you don't really love me, all you love is your money. All you care about is the fact that you're making money at this job. And of course, she's insulted. She wants him to leave. He says that during this altercation, he tries to have sex with her. Though these are his words. He said, I tried to have sex with her, and she cuts his face open with a letter opener. And when she does this, she cuts him open, he's bleeding all over the floor, and then she runs into the bathroom to vomit. She eventually comes out, hands him a towel to stop the bleeding, and tells him to get out, to never contact her again. She says, I never want to see you again. What she specifically says, why would you make me do that? Like, how could you do that to me? And McVrees, telling the story, is saying, can you believe this shit? Can you believe? She says, why would I do that to her? She's the one who cut me open. And he specifically says, like, she acts like I was trying to rape her. Which, based on Garrity's, response to all this, and based on the contextual clues we get in the story, even though it's from McVrees' point of view, it's him telling the story, we know that he did try to rape her. In his eyes, that wasn't what it was, but for her, it was an assault. So, even McVrees, Garrity's sort of challenging him on the story. He was saying, well, that's not fair, you weren't fair to her. And McVrees agrees. He says, I know I wasn't fair to her, but what else was I supposed to do? As we get a lot of insight into McVrees' self-loathing, into why he is so cynical, why he's so world-weary. And we see that McVrees really does not think well of himself, that the reason why he decided to do the long walk, the reason why he's risking his life doing this, is because he hates himself. He thinks he's a failure, and he, thinks, well, that was the one good thing I had in my life, and I messed it up, so there's really nothing for me to lose now by joining this competition. And that is how McVrees ends up with the scar on his face. That's how he ended up here on the walk with Garrity. And at the end of the story, McVrees says, like, I thought it would hurt telling someone about what happened to me. But he says, honestly, by this point in the walk, it's like, I don't care anymore. She's small fry. Like, he realizes now that it's all meaningless. He's like, this huge event that happened that I thought traumatized me, essentially. He's like, now, I think about Priscilla and I think about her, and I don't feel anything for her anymore. Like, now he's facing dying on this walk, and all of that stuff that happened before really doesn't matter. After McVrees opens up, we now get a little time skip, and we get into the afternoon of the second day. It's around 1 p.m., and the boys are starting to die to heat stroke. We get sight of at least 2 boys who just collapse from heat stroke. They pass out, and after the 3 warnings, they get shot. And Garrity is almost a little envious of them. Like, yes, he's hot, yes, he's tired, but he thinks that's the best way to go. You just pass out, and you're completely, blissfully unaware as the soldiers shoot you. So, just a little check-in to where Garrity's headspace is at. Here is where we also get a check-in with Scram. So Scram, who had been sniffling and sneezing a little earlier in the story, is now proceeding to get sicker and sicker. He finally admits that this isn't just allergies, he most likely has a cold. He's getting more and more congested, and he's starting to run a fever now. It's while they're checking in with Scram that Abraham is in awe of him. He's talking to Scram, he's asking, like, how can you possibly keep walking? Like, everyone, even the boys who are in complete full health, who are at 100%, are dying under the heat of the sun. He's like, Scram, you are sick and running a fever. How do you keep going? And Scram, in one of my favorite Scram moments, he says, me? How do I keep going? How the hell does Olsen keep going? And then he points at Olsen, who, like we have seen before, has just been rotting and decaying in front of their eyes. Olsen, they mention, is just like a head on a stick. He is so gaunt and pale and sickly looking and just with dry, cracked lips. He's even walking with his mouth slightly open. He has his tongue hanging out, and he said his tongue is dry and gross looking. He's thin and pale, and he's, by this point, completely stopped interacting or speaking to anyone. So, of course, they all look at Olsen and kind of really take stock of, like, that's how bad it is going to get. And Garrity reflects on the fact that he for sure doesn't want to end up like Olsen. Like, he knows that he could die, but he just doesn't want to die like that. So now the heat is getting worse and worse, especially as they're getting into the afternoon. And finally, post Percy's death, we get the sight of Percy's mom, who has shown up again. She is now screaming for her dead son, and she sees that he is not among the walkers. And whereas previously this had been a source of entertainment, it now feels very sad. Percy was young, he was maybe 13 or 14, and his mom has to wrangle with the fact that he is no longer there. He is no longer amongst the living. And she is obviously in hysterics and is once again pulled away and taken by police officers. As terrible and horribly sad as the scene we get with Percy's mom is, it is followed by probably one of my favorite moments in the book, which is, it's hot as balls, they're making their way downtown, walking fast, faces passing their homebound, and they see what is described as a stereotypically Italian man with selling watermelons. Like, he has a big chest full of ice with these big slices of watermelon. And he's attempting to give them for free to the long walkers. He says, I love you guys, I support you, here, take these, take my wares. And of course, the soldiers will not allow them. The police officers who are on crowd control are not letting him share the watermelon. So as he's getting desperate, he is trying to get these watermelon to the long walkers. And of course, the boys are desperate for it. They are so exhausted. It's so hot. They're just so dry and thirsty, and watermelon sounds like the best thing in the world to them. And of course, they're already accepting the fact that there's no way we can get it. There's no way they're ever going to let him give us any type of food or aid. It's against the rules. Well, this little old Italian man, he takes the watermelons in his arms, and as the police are trying to drag him backwards, he throws them into the street. They go flying through the air, and all the boys run forward and are able to catch the watermelon. Because at this point, the second it gets into the road, the soldiers are not going to intervene and stop them, because then they would have to physically restrain the boys. So he throws the watermelons into the air, and it's mentioned that every single kid was able to at least get a piece of watermelon. Every single kid was able to get something. Collie Parker breaks off half of his and tosses it to Garrity. And it is just this moment of all resentments, any enemies made, it is all forgotten in this brief, pure moment where they are all able to share delicious, crisp, cool watermelon. And it is one of the only moments of joy we really get in this book. Garrity takes his piece and shares some with McVrees, and they're just laughing and smiling. And for one glorious moment, they are so happy to just be in this hot summer day with each other, sharing company and eating ice cold watermelon. Now, it's about 2:30 that they get the first rumblings of a storm rolling in. So throughout the time that it's been so hot, they have been begging for rain. So a lot of them are getting really excited that they can see the storm clouds rolling, and a huge gust of wind comes through, and they can tell that this is going to be a big storm. At this point, the rain starts coming down, and it's not a light trickle. It starts pouring rain. And then they realize it's not just raining, it starts hailing. Like, good chunk-sized hail starts pelting these guys. And of course, after all of the horrible heat of the day, even when the rain comes, they are not happy. It is raining and hailing, and it's essentially just as bad as the heat was, just in the opposite direction. As the rain keeps pouring onto the boys, we are now moving towards the second night. They've gone through the afternoon, the rain is still coming down. It's at this point that Garrity will give the reader a little marker and let you know 50 boys are dead. They are now down to 50 remaining, including Garrity. And now that they are past the 100-mile mark, they are getting close to Ray's hometown. They're going to get close to the area where Ray grew up in. And he's starting to get a bit of a second wind. He's getting really excited to go into a familiar area and to hopefully cross through his hometown so he can see his mom and his girlfriend. As the first night continues, Ray once again seeks out Stebbins, and they have a long talk about the meaning of the walk. Because like we said before, Garrity is searching for meaning out of this walk. He wants it to mean something. He wants the deaths to mean something. And they start talking about, what type of motivation it would take to make it through. Like, what type of person do you need to be to win the long walk? And Stebbins gives Garrity a piece of advice. He says, you want to know something about motivation? Watch Olson. He's like, we're all motivated by something. That's why we keep walking. He's like, Olson is a boy who has now lost that motivation. He's walking, but he's almost through. He compares Olson to a mule who has lost his appetite for the carrot. He's like, Olson's almost there now. He's almost to that point. Keep an eye on him and you're going to learn something from Olson. And it's this comment from Stebbins that causes Garrity to now start trying to talk to Olson. Olson, who hasn't been speaking in hours. He has stopped eating. He has stopped drinking. He has stopped existing, essentially. They say that Olson is he's sucked so far into his own brain that you almost can't reach him. So it's around 9 p.m. that Garrity is trying to talk to Olson, and he's starting to get some type of response. Olson starts looking at him. He starts whispering and mouthing words. And he starts essentially mumbling almost nonsense. He starts talking about God and God's garden. He starts telling Garrity that, Jesus will save you. And then all of a sudden, he runs at the soldiers. Olson, who at this point is just barely shambling along, sprints at the soldiers and tries to climb onto the side of the vehicle. He's trying to pull the gun away from one of the soldiers. And of course, he managed to actually pull one away and chuck it aside. But one of the other soldiers aims his rifle and he shoots Olson in the midpoint, not in the head. He shoots him in the gut. So Olson goes tumbling off the half track and lands on the ground. But he's not dead yet. They keep shooting Olson and he keeps standing back up. He's standing up and they shoot him so many times in his midsection that his intestines fall out. They're described as like blue sausage links. They're rolling onto the ground and Olson is trying to hold them in, and the entire time he is still standing, still walking, still attempting to move forward. And finally, they are able to shoot him down one last time. He falls to his knees and he shouts into the sky, I did it wrong, and finally falls down dead. This scene was one, even for the reader, it is one of the most graphic deaths in the book. It is one of the most built up deaths in the book. We have been watching Olson up until this point decay almost into nothing. He is described as being nearly ghoulish, almost like a zombie in appearance. And he is almost like the living dead. He gets shot so many times, it should be impossible for him to keep going. And yet this scene is so drawn out because Olson just will not die. And when he finally collapses, it is to the shock and horror of everyone. Even the spectators are disgusted by what they've seen. And it's Abraham who literally vomits watching Olson walk with his intestines hanging out. When Olson had fallen to his knees, Garrity ran to him. As Olson is taking his final shout and breathing his last breath, Garrity runs to Olson and holds him and is crying over the death of someone he considered a friend. And once again, it is McVrees who has to go to Garrity and say, keep going. He picks him up and says, you can't stop. You can't mourn over him. We need to keep going. So McVrees gets Garrity to continue the walk. And this is once again McVrees saving Garrity's life, because Garrity was going to stop walking right then and there to mourn Olson. Both McVrees and Garrity are reeling from Olson's death, from just how graphic it was. We check back in with our main characters around midnight as they are entering Old Town. So by this point in the novel, things are ramping up and our main character is going to be allowing more time to pass between narrations. So previously we were getting updates every hour. Now Ray will start time skipping a little more before we check in with what is going on. So they make it to Old Town around midnight, and Ray is nearly delirious with sleep deprivation. He's walking in a sleep-induced haze. The only thing he can really say about Old Town is he says the only thing he really recognizes is at least no one died as they were passing through. So since Olson's death, they do receive a break before anyone else gets a ticket. After they pass through Old Town, news comes back to our main characters that they are going to be receiving a 400-gun salute. There is essentially a small army waiting a few miles up ahead, and they are going to raise their rifles and shoot as the boys pass by. The boys then coordinate amongst all of them to blow raspberries back at the military after the salute goes off. And they say themselves that they do a 50-man raspberry salute. It's quiet, sad, and pathetic, but it is a sign that despite everything, despite Olsen's death, despite all they have seen, they still have some fight in them, and they're still trying to fight back any way that they can. After the raspberry stunt, we check back in with Scram. Word comes back that Scram's fever has gotten worse, and that he's, at this point, completely delirious. It's Art Baker who comes up to Garrity and McVrees and gives them the rundown. He says, hey, we've been taking care of Scram. We've been giving him water. We've been pouring water on his head to help bring his fever down. But that's really all they can do for him, and things aren't looking good. Now, it's after this conversation with Baker that Collie Parker and Garrity talk amongst themselves. And Garrity makes the observation that, now that they're down to the last 50 guys, he feels like, well, this is going to go pretty quickly now. Like, it must be over soon. Guys are going to start dropping like flies. And Collie Parker hits him back with the whole, he's like, hey, the first 50 to die were the weak ones. We, the ones who are still left, are strong. He's like, they're going to last much longer than you think they will, because these are the guys who are now determined to live. And of course, this immediately gets in Garrity's head, because he had kind of been hyping himself up thinking like, it can't be that much longer now. Surely the walk must be over sometime soon now that we're halfway through it. And Collie Parker has to hit him with that reality check. No. He's like, the guys who are here are determined to win, and there's no way they're gonna be out of the fight that quickly. After this conversation with Parker, Garrity once again gets sucked into these dark memories, gets sucked back into that pit of despair where he's just thinking about his dad. He's thinking about the shame he felt as a kid getting caught with another boy, the shame and anger he feels towards his mother. In order to avoid these thoughts, he starts focusing on Jan, his girlfriend Jan, who he is planning on seeing in Freeport. This is the strongest motivator he has now. This is the one thing that is keeping the dark thoughts at bay, and that is keeping him going, is they're getting closer and closer to his hometown, and he's going to be able to see his girlfriend again. It's also right now, through this night, that Garrity has the realization that he needs to take a shit for the first time so far in the story. And right now, they have a huge amount of spectators on either side of them. Like, this is not a small crowd. There are going to be people watching them for the rest of the walk. And Garrity has the realization that he's going to have to poop in front of all these people, in front of cameras. So he drops his pants, squats down, and takes a shit right there on the pavement. And the entire time there are people pointing and laughing at him. He says he can hear like a little girl scream and talk about how she can see it, she can see his penis. And he is feeling the most intense amount of shame. Like, poor Garrity is so embarrassed at having to take a shit in front of all these people who are pointing and laughing at him. He can literally hear the shutters of cameras going off as people are taking photos of him going through the worst moment of his life. He pulls his pants back up and he's able to keep walking in time. He only gets one warning from it. He's just relieved that it's over. And after that, he catches up with McVrees, and McVrees is able to joke about it with him and kind of relieve some of that tension, because Garrity just had one of the worst, most embarrassing experiences of his life. And McVrees and him start joking about it and talking about how, like, hey, you know what? He's like, first of all, that's the fastest shit you ever took in your life. And it's over now. We're good. We made it. And McVrees kind of gives him a little grudging respect for being able to go through that. After this conversation with McVrees, we get word from Baker. He comes up to the two of them and talks about two characters, Joe and Mike. So Joe and Mike have been part of the Vanguard, that group of boys who have been walking really far ahead of everyone else. So we haven't really gotten a chance to meet them yet. But he says that Joe and Mike apparently are brothers, which pisses off McVrees. He says that is so demented. What parents would let both their kids join the long walk? Who would pit brother against brother to do this? Now, at this point, the next check-in we get is they have made it through the night, and it is now 9 a.m. It is the dawn of day 3, and everyone is looking worse for wear. People are not doing great. So Garrity and Pearson are having a conversation that then gets interrupted by McVrees, who brings the somber news that Scram is dying. He's been getting worse and worse, and now his cold has turned into pneumonia. McVries has now gone up to every guy on the walk, and he gets them to agree to take care of Scram's wife and child. He says, hey, I want to make an agreement that whoever wins is gonna take care of Scram's wife. So of course, Garrity agrees, all of our main characters agree, and apparently the only two people who haven't been asked yet are Barkovich and Stebbins. So Garrity volunteers to go ask Barkovich. McVries right off the bat says there's no way he would agree. He's not even gonna bother. Garrity, to be thorough, says, I'm gonna ask him to, let's just see what he says. And then of course, Garrity is the only person who Stebbins has actually ever spoken to. So they all ask him like, hey, can you go ask Stebbins as well? So first, Garrity approaches Barkovich. And initially, Barkovich is of course his usual hateful self. He says, Garrity, you dumb fuck, like, what do you want? What are you doing? And when Garrity explains to him that Scram has a wife, initially Barkovich is, one, shocked, but two, he's saying, that dumb motherfucker. Like, what is wrong with him? He said, who in their right mind would leave their wife and unborn baby at home to join the Long Walk? He's essentially saying, well, that guy gets what he deserves. So of course, Garrity says, like, okay, fuck you, whatever, you don't have to agree. And this is where something unexpected happens. Barkovich grabs onto Garrity's sleeve and says, no, hold on a minute. I didn't say no. Like, just wait. And this is where we get the first moment of vulnerability we will ever see from Barkovich. So he turns to Garrity and says, like, hey, like, I'll do it. I promise I'll do it. And he says, I'm not a bad guy. Like, I want you guys to understand that I know you will hate me, but I'm not a bad person. I really am a good guy when you get to know me. We can see that the hate for Barkovich, the fact that he's been isolated from the rest of the group, is really starting to affect him. Because at this point in the walk, they are all struggling mentally and physically. And by now, Barkovich is scared. He's scared of dying. And even worse, he says that he's scared of dying hated. He doesn't want to die knowing that everyone despises him. So he tells Garrity that, like, hey, this was all a misunderstanding. Like, you don't get it. I didn't mean for Rank to die. Like, yes, I insulted him, but I genuinely didn't intend for him to die that way. I didn't think that that would lead to him being killed. And Garrity sort of brushes him off. He says, like, okay, cool. Well, I'm glad you agreed. Anyway, bye. Garrity's not going to forgive him that easily, but from what we can tell from reading it and from the way it's described in the novel, we can tell that Barkovich is being genuine. He genuinely, at least on his end, doesn't believe that he killed Rank on purpose. And he's so scared of dying alone and dying with everyone hating him, despite the fact that he brought it upon himself. And this really is the first humanizingly moment we get from Barkovich. So Garrity walks away from that conversation and he realizes that he is scared. He's scared of the touch of humanity that he saw in Barkovich. It frightened him deeply. He then goes to talk to Stebbins. So Stebbins, once again, he hasn't had many conversations with him, but he is the only character that Stebbins has been willing to talk to. So he thinks, you know what, I'm gonna try. Stebbins is a super weird guy. I'm sure he'll say no, but he at least wants to make the attempt. And to his surprise, when he approaches Stebbins and explains the whole Scram situation, immediately he agrees. Really throwing Garrity off guard, Stebbins just says, yeah, sure, whatever. What do I have to lose? And this leads to Stebbins kind of going into a monologue about how he's like, I'm sure something like this happens on every long walk. You're all doing this to make yourselves feel better. You're doing this because you're scared of dying. But he's like, it's no skin off my teeth. It literally cost me nothing to agree to this. So he's like, all right, I'll help him out. But I just want to let you know, your gesture is empty and meaningless. After that, Garrity catches up back with his main pack, and he checks in with Scram. Scram, who is now at least less delirious, he's now conscious and cognitive, and he was just lamenting the fact that he had to get sick. He was like, it was just an act of God. He was doing so good, and he just so happened to get sick, and that was it. That's going to be the reason why he can't win this. And of course, everyone, Abraham, Pearson, McVries, they're all giving essentially their condolences. Like, Scram is aware that he's not going to live very long and that there's no way he can keep going much longer. Okay, so it's here that they get word again about Mike and Joe, the two Native American brothers who had been walking up ahead. A boy comes back and brings word. I heard from the grapevine that Mike has really bad stomach cramps and that he thinks that he's probably not going to be able to make it. It's after hearing this that Scram gets an idea. He doesn't say his plan, but he walks up ahead, then turns around and says goodbye to everyone. They all say their goodbyes to him, a little confused, but Scram has this look of determination. He turns around, he walks ahead up to Mike and Joe. They can see them confer for a few minutes. They talk amongst themselves. So in their final moments, Scram goes to Mike and says, hey, we're both dying. And in a final act of dignity, they give themselves a good death. They know they're gonna die anyway. They might as well die in an act of rebellion. Scram and Mike walk towards the crowd and sit right in front of the half-track, in front of the vehicle, stopping the soldiers. They sit cross-legged, raise their middle fingers into the air, and say, I fucked your mom. They sit there with their fingers raised and get shot by the soldiers. So we check back in with the group around 2 p.m. Abraham and Baker are having a game of dimes when out of the blue, Garrity starts screaming out that his leg is cramping. So at this point, Garrity had never had any major physical issues, but his leg cramps so bad that he is no longer able to walk. And all of a sudden, everyone's walking ahead of him, and he just collapses to the ground and starts trying to work the cramp out of his leg. And he gets his first warning, he gets his second warning, he gets his third warning. There's about a minute between each warning. There's about a minute between your third warning and when you get killed. And Garrity is sitting there on the pavement. He can hear McVrees shouting his name. McVrees sounds terrified for him. And Garrity is just desperately trying to work the cramp out of his leg. So at a certain point, he gives in. He gets his third warning, and he almost gets this moment of peace where he accepts the fact that he's going to die. Everything goes in slow motion. He can see the soldier cocking his rifle, aiming it at him, and counting down the seconds until his time limit is up. And right at the final moment, the cramp loosens, and Garrity is able to find the strength to stand back up and then suddenly jolt forward and run back to the main pack of boys. This was the closest Garrity has gotten so far to really dying. He was within seconds of getting a bullet to the head, and it scares him bad. Enough that from this point on, once you get your third warning, it's going to take about an hour before that warning drops off. So from this point on, he is speed walking. He is terrified. He's literally 2 seconds from dying for the next hour. He's able to catch up with McVrees. And of course, McVrees, my favorite character, our main man, looks at Garrity and just says, you made it. I'm so happy you're alive. And Garrity asks him, he's like, hey, I'm 2 seconds away from dying for the next hour. Do you want to walk ahead of everyone else with me just to be safe? And McVrees, of course, says, like, for you, buddy, anything. So they walk ahead of the crowd and are by themselves in front of the pack. And Garrity now is just shaken by his near-death experience. And at this point, he's mentally starting to unravel a bit. He once again is just spiraling into these thoughts about dying and about how he's not going to be able to make it. And it is McVrees who is able to calm him down. He's able to distract Garrity through conversation. This time he's asking him, like, so what did you do when you found out you were in the long walk? And they start sharing, how they applied for the long walk, how they ended up getting into this. Apparently the application process is literally you have to take a physical examination, a written test, like a written exam. And after that, they do a random pick, like a lottery drawing of all the boys who applied. So through this conversation, McVrees is able to get Garrity's mind off of his time limit, off of the fact that he was so close to dying. And then McVrees also shares a little bit of how he got into the long walk. And he mentions that he was actually an alternate. He was not meant to be in the actual competition, but I think he said 11 boys dropped out before the final date. And so he ended up being called in to fill in one of those vacant spots. So after the conversation with McVrees and Garrity, it's been about 1 hour since he got his third warning, and he's finally able to relax a little bit. He knows that he's going to be, at least for now, okay. And Garrity once again thanks McVrees for saving his life. All right, so we check back in with the main group at around 6 p.m. McVrees and Garrity rejoin them, and they're now getting close to Augusta. Augusta is the second city they're going to reach right before Freeport. Freeport is Garrity's hometown. That's where he's going to be able to see his mom and his girlfriend again. So everyone is just counting down the miles until they get to Augusta. Now, as they're approaching the city, they said that they can hear the crowd 5 miles out. The crowd in Augusta is the largest they've seen yet. They said it is like waves of people crashing against the shore. The city of Augusta no longer exists. It has been consumed by the crowd. So as they enter, they're almost swallowed by the noise and the chaos of it all. Every city they enter from now until this point, the crowds just grow larger and larger. Now that they've entered Augusta, Cully Parker and Garrity have a little friendly chit-chat, and we can see at this point that they're getting along a lot better now. Parker and Garrity had a bit of a rough start, and Parker definitely comes off as sort of a dick. But as they enter Augusta, we can see that these two are on much better terms, and Garrity admits that he likes Cully Parker a lot more now. So McVreeze butts into Cully Parker and Garrity's conversation, and when McVreeze shows up, Cully Parker kind of gives a little, he says, "You guys are weird," and he leaves, he walks away. And Garrity's a little confused, but McVreeze clarifies, he kind of chimes in, he says, "Hey, just so you know, Cully Parker thinks we're gay for each other. He thinks we're queer." And McVreeze says thoughtfully, like, "You know, he's not a bad guy, and I think he's right." He's like, "Maybe that's why I saved your life. I think I'm gay for you." And you can't quite tell if McVreeze is joking or not, and neither can Garrity. Garrity's trying to suss out whether McVreeze is just making fun of him or if he's being serious. And suddenly McVreeze looks at him and says, "Would you let me jerk you off?" And Garrity immediately is like angry. He says, "What the hell are you doing?" When McVreeze stops being jovial about this, he almost gets angry. He starts to get upset. He says, "Well, I'm asking you seriously." He's like, "No jokes, I'm asking you seriously. Would you let me jerk you off?" Garrity, now faced with this question, now faced with, he's already been struggling with thoughts about his own sexuality, is now faced with his best friend asking him straight out, essentially, "Are you gay for me?" And Garrity thinks about it seriously. He really has to ponder this question of would he let McVreeze jerk him off? And he essentially goes, "Well, you did save my life." And then eventually just says, "You can do whatever you want." That's his answer. Not a yes or no, but essentially, "You saved my life. I owe you one. If you really want to, you can." And Garrity, of course, is like going through the mental ringer pondering this question. He's having an internal gay freakout over this question. And McVreeze suddenly laughs. He laughs and says, "You know what, Garrity? You're a good guy. I like you." Pats him on the shoulder and then leaves. After that very awkward conversation between McVreeze and Garrity, McVreeze leaves and Garrity is left to walk on his own for a bit and stew in his very turbulent thoughts. It's here that Garrity makes the observation that most of the boys by now have either completely lost their appetites or are eating very little, and describes that they're all losing weight at a rapid pace due to the physical toll the long walk is taking on them. He describes them all as being frighteningly thin. He uses the term concentration camp horrors to describe what the boys look like now walking through the street. And it's around this time that Garrity gets word about Barkovich. He hears that Barkovich isn't doing well, that he has cramps, that he's limping, and that he most likely will be the next to die. Garrity then seeks out Barkovich to confirm this information for himself. It is when he seeks out Barkovich that the mental toll from the conversation Garrity had with McVreeze starts to really show. He at first comes off as very friendly, almost empathetic towards Barkovich and what's happening to him. He is exhausted. Barkovich is not doing well at this point, and he's getting close to the end of his rope. And initially, Garrity is asking him, out of genuine concern, "How are you?" When Barkovich starts making mean comments, as Barkovich is known to do, Garrity then starts mocking him. He starts taunting him with his own worst fears. That moment of vulnerability that Barkovich had shared with Garrity, Gary then turns around back on him. He says, "You are hated. You will die alone. And when they blow your brains on the pavement, we're all gonna spit on them as we walk by." And Barkovich does not brush it off. He is now hearing his worst fears being reflected back at him, and he starts to cry. He starts to legitimately be in distress. And Garrity, after yelling at him, after losing it on Barkovich, feels genuine remorse. He walks away. He literally has to leave the conversation because he realizes he is hurling all his vitriol at Barkovich, who doesn't necessarily deserve it. Garrity is more so freaking out about the about the gay thoughts and about the interaction he had with McVrees and having to confront his own sexuality, that when he starts interacting with Barkovich, all of that hatred and that vitriol that had been built up inside of him just comes out in one huge explosion. So Garrity feels a lot of shame and remorse about how he treated Barkovich and how he left that interaction. Night has fallen and they are leaving Augusta, and they're discussing the layout of the road until Freeport. Garrity is kind of breaking down what stops and what towns they're going to reach before they ultimately reach his hometown. It is during this conversation that they hear a gunshot, and when they turn around, everyone thinks it must be Barkovich. He's been on his last legs, and they're convinced that this was the bullet that killed him. Of course, though, when they turn around, Barkovich is fine. It was another unnamed boy who died. But he sees how everyone turned, and he starts yelling that I'm not dead yet. How dare you? I'm not dead yet. And he starts losing his mind. As he's screaming at them, his scream rises to a fever pitch. And then Barkovich reaches up and tears out his own throat. He starts clawing desperately at his neck as he is still screaming higher and higher and louder until he is ripping out his own vocal cords before finally falling to his knees, silent. And then, of course, the soldiers shoot him. Now, Barkovich was not well liked, but everyone is still shell-shocked as they watch Barkovich go completely insane and kill himself. McVrees makes a very McVrees comment where it's quiet for a while, no one speaks, and McVrees just says very somberly, I think I wish I were insane. And that is the only comment anyone makes about Barkovich's death. After the death of Barkovich, we then time skip to the next morning, marking dawn of day 4. So Garrity is now very excited to be reaching Freeport. They're about 13 miles out, and he mentions that 6 people died over the course of the night after Barkovich, one of them being Pearson, another character we had seen previously. At this point, there are now only 26 boys left. As they're coming up to Freeport, McVrees laments that Stebbins is unbeatable. Of all the boys, Stebbins is the only one that seems, by this point, completely unaffected by the horrors and the physical toll of the long walk. And now that we're here on day 4, the weather is also not doing great. It is once again raining, and it will continue to be raining on and off from now until the end of the novel. Around here, as they're approaching Freeport, Garrity starts getting worried about Baker. He wants to go check up on him, and as he starts hanging back to catch up to Baker, he ends up walking right next to Stebbins. So Stebbins starts playing mind games with Garrity at this point. He is playing on his fears that his girlfriend Jan will not be in Freeport, that he had been walking all this time anticipating their reunion, and that he won't even get a chance to see her. Garrity, of course, is very easily riled up, especially by Stebbins, and starts yelling, starts losing his cool, and after the interaction ends, he immediately feels embarrassment, knowing he knows what Stebbins is doing. Stebbins is purposefully trying to play mind games with him. He's aware of that, and yet he still can never get Stebbins' words out of his head. He is now worried that he won't see his girlfriend, he won't see his mom, that they're not even going to be there when they make it to Freeport. And by this point, seeing them is the only thing that is keeping him going, especially after witnessing the death of Olson and Barkovich. He is so close to his breaking point, and he just wants to see familiar faces before he dies. After that talk with Stebbins, he finally is able to find Baker in the crowd of boys, and he does a little check-in, he does a little wellness check, and we can see that Baker is not doing great. He starts talking about that he hopes when he dies, it won't be dark. He says, I'm fine with anything, just please don't let it be dark, and please let me remember. He says the only thing he really wants out of an afterlife is that he wants light, and he wants to be able to keep the memories he made while still on Earth. It is also during this checkup with Barkovich that one of Garrity's shoes begins to fall apart. The bottom flap completely falls off, and he's forced to remove that one shoe. He's attempting to walk with only one shoe on, and realizes that the uneven gait is going to mess him up way more than just taking both shoes off. So Garrity is now walking in socks, which was one of his worst fears after the story Stebbins told of the final walker walking on broken, mangled feet. Garrity now has to give up his shoes and walk on bare socks for the remainder of the long walk. Now by this point, Garrity is losing his mind and falling apart in anticipation of seeing Jan and his mom, and with the anxiety that he might not be able to see them. Stebbins really got in his head, and McVrees is once again trying to calm him down. McVrees is trying to talk him through his panic and say, like, you are going to see them, they'll be there, calm down, like, just take a second to collect yourself. And Garrity blows up on McVrees, because once again, Garrity is still ruminating on that conversation they had about jerking each other off. So he blows up on McVrees and says, get out of my face, don't talk to me, just leave me alone. And McVrees does. He then walks off and leaves Garrity to just stew in his thoughts. So by 9 a.m., they have finally reached Freeport, the moment that Garrity has been waiting for since the beginning, since day one. As they are walking through Freeport and get through the main humongous crowd, Garrity finally sees, there in the distance, his girlfriend and his mom. They made it, they got front row seats, and they are cheering him on. He then does something that I think we all could have foreseen. He loses it. He starts trying to run into the crowd in order to reunite with his mom and Jan. And McVrees has to once again physically restrain him and hold him back. Garrity completely loses all sense of self-preservation, and he is fully willing to die right then and there just to be able to hug Jan again, just to be able to see her and see his mom. And McVrees has to convince him that he would traumatize them, that like he would traumatize his loved ones by dying in front of them. And even though McVrees makes sense, and Garrity is aware that McVrees is right, that he is doing something horrible by choosing to die right in front of his loved ones, Garrity still tries to do it anyway and still needs to be physically moved. McVrees grabs him, and he is literally so much stronger than Garrity that he's able to physically restrain him and keep him walking the correct direction until Garrity eventually gives up. So after the event in Freeport, where McVrees had once again had to save Garrity, they are no longer speaking to each other. Garrity feels ashamed that he had to be saved again. It is at this point, when McVrees and Garrity are no longer on speaking terms, that Abraham approaches Garrity and tells him about a promise that he's getting from each and every boy there. They are reaching the back half of the long walk. They are approaching the tail end. There are only a quarter of the original boys left. And he tells Garrity, I'm getting a promise from everyone that there will be no more help. No more saving each other, no more helping each other out. It's going to be every man for himself from now on. But he's trying to get everyone to agree to it. So Garrity initially is very hesitant. He says outright that he owes McVrees. He's like, I owe McVrees my life. He has saved me now multiple times. I don't know if I can make a promise like that. But as he says that, he goes and looks at McVrees, who is once again still ignoring him. And since McVrees doesn't speak up and doesn't try to say anything against it, he eventually does agree, although he feels very guilty about it. He agrees that it will be every man for himself, and he feels ashamed to admit that he would not save McVrees if something were to happen. Now, we do a little time skip once again. It is now 6 p.m., and only one person has died since Freeport. At this point, it's silent. No one is talking to each other, and they are taking that promise of every man for himself very seriously. As the rain pours down, Collie Parker is the first one to break the silence. Now, he does this by climbing onto the half-track where the soldiers are, steals a gun, and manages to kill one of the soldiers that have been terrorizing them for the past 4 days. He is the first boy to ever succeed in some form of mutiny. And as he's standing up there, he tries to do a call to action. He tries to motivate some of the other boys to join him. You know, we can take them, we can do it, we can end this right now. But unfortunately, the fight and the spirit has already left all the other contestants. They no longer have the energy to even fully comprehend what is going on and what Collie Parker is doing. The only character who sees Collie Parker shoot a soldier and immediately tries to follow his call to arms is McVrees. McVrees begins shouting and lamenting and trying to get the other boys to join. But by that point, Collie Parker is then gunned down by the soldiers and his rebellion is over. And McVrees laments that they missed their chance, that this was the one opportunity they could have had to end the long walk right there and then, and they missed it. By 9 p.m., after the death of Collie Parker, the rain has finally stopped, so we see that Abraham is succumbing to the cold. He's not dead yet, but he has come down with an illness and is beginning to show symptoms of pneumonia very similar to Scram. So the only friends left that Garrity has are Baker, Abraham McVrees, and Stebbins, if he counts. Right now, Garrity is walking next to Baker, and Baker begins to talk about what type of coffins he wants for his funeral. He goes and describes that he specifically wants a lead-lined coffin to keep the bugs and the moisture out, that he wants his body to be as preserved as possible, which really starts to scare Garrity. Garrity already can't stop thinking about what it's going to be like to die, and hearing Baker planning his own funeral really starts to get in Garrity's head. As this fourth night continues, people are dying much more quickly than what happened previously. So over the course of the day, very few guys had actually bought their ticket besides Cully Parker. Now that we're getting into 1, 2, 3 a.m., boys are dropping like flies. It is around 2 a.m. that Art Baker has a serious fall and bashes his head on the pavement. And it appears that he won't be able to get up. So Garrity, of course, goes to try and help him. Even despite that promise he made, when he sees Art Baker fall, he immediately reacts and tries to help his friend get back up. And it is McVrees who grabs his arm, restrains them, and says, "No, we made a promise. There's going to be no more help. Every man for himself." Luckily, Baker does eventually get up before he is shot by the soldiers. But we can tell that he was already not doing great. He is doing even worse. He seems to have a concussion and is just barely stumbling forward. With Baker getting injured, things are looking especially bleak. Everyone is weakening. They are all shambling along, emaciated shells of their former selves. By the time dawn breaks, Abraham succumbs to his illness and dies, along with 2 other boys, unnamed, who died in the middle of the night. When Abraham succumbs, he essentially falls to the ground and begins attempting to crawl forward while gurgling, unable to take full breaths. And Garrity watches his friend crawl along the floor and describes him looking like a lamb sent to slaughter. And that picture is going to remain with Garrity for the rest of the walk. With dawn breaking and the death of Abraham, we have now entered part 3, the rabbit. It is dawn of the final day. We are entering day 5. There are only 9 walkers left on the walk. By 9 a.m., they pass out their food rations for the day, but honestly, no one can even stomach food any longer. No one, that is, except for Stebbins, who immediately scarfs down crackers and peanut butter, makes a big show of it, and essentially shows off to the other guys that while they have all weakened to the point of emaciation and can no longer eat, he is still strong. It is here that McVrees laments to Garrity that most likely this long walk is going to take them all the way to Massachusetts, setting a record and being the first long walk to do so in 17 years. Like, this is not going to end anytime soon. They are now almost through New Hampshire and are 15 miles from the border of Massachusetts. McVrees, Stebbins, and Garrity are all walking together because these are the last remaining group of boys who really know each other, and they're finding a comfort by staying together during this last day of the long walk. It is during this time that Garrity and McVrees finally start to really talk to Stebbins, both of them, and they start asking him questions about himself. Essentially, they're like, "We have reached the end. There are so few boys left. We are most likely going to die. Just tell us, who are you? What are you about? Why do you know so much about the long walk?" Like, they finally press Stebbins for answers. And Stebbins, by this point, finally admits that he is not Superman. He admits that he is human, and he really opens up in the first moment of vulnerability we get from Stebbins. Stebbins finally talks about who he is and why he's on the long walk. So once again, Stebbins decides to answer their questions in a very vague, almost riddle. He speaks in a metaphor. And this is a very important moment in the book, so I'm going to go ahead and quote some of this directly. So after being asked this question, Stebbins responds with, "I'm the rabbit. You've seen them, Garrity. The little gray mechanical rabbits that the greyhounds chase at dog races. No matter how fast the dog runs, they can never quite catch the rabbit, because the rabbit isn't flesh and blood, and they are. The rabbit, he's just a cutout on a stick attached to a bunch of cogs and wheels." He then pauses and says, "Maybe you could even say, he conjured me. He changed me into a rabbit." It is after giving that very apt metaphor, where of course, when asked for clarification, Stebbins finally reveals that he is the Major's son. Stebbins is the Major's bastard son, and the reason why he is here on the long walk is to prove himself to his father. He is doing all of this to get the Major's attention, to prove to his dad that he is a worthy son. So Stebbins has spent his entire life learning and studying the long walk, all in preparation for one day entering. And when he won, he was going to reveal to the world that he is the bastard son of the Major and force his father to recognize him in front of the nation. Now, this plan for Stebbins, he admits, backfired, because after he enlists in the Long Walk and he joins, he realizes that the Major was aware that Stebbins was his son the entire time, and that is the reason why he was picked for the Long Walk. The Major used Stebbins as a motivating factor, as a rabbit to lead the dogs, as a rabbit to push everyone to walk further. And he says it works. They are breaking records. They're going to make it all the way to Massachusetts because Stebbins feels like he has been motivating everyone to walk further. The Major knew the entire time that Stebbins was his son, and he turned Stebbins into his rabbit, into his tool for moving the Long Walk forward. Now, McVrees and Garrity are shocked at this revelation, and it really puts all of Stebbins' behavior into perspective, and it fully explains why he is, not only why is he here, but why he is so knowledgeable at the Long Walk, and why he was the only person who really went into this competition psychologically prepared, fully knowing that it might kill him, but it didn't matter. He was willing to die in order to get his father's respect, love, and admiration. As they approach the border of Massachusetts, there are now 7 boys left in the competition. So of course there is our main cast. We have Baker is still alive, we have McVrees, Stebbins, and Garrity. And then the other 3 are going to be previously unnamed boys who will get mentioned now here. It's going to be George Fielder, Bill Ho, and a boy named Radigan. It is here that Garrity takes note of Baker, who had suffered the head injury but is still continuing to walk, but by now he is hemorrhaging from his nose. He has an extremely bad nosebleed that has been going on for the past few hours, and it is clear that Baker is reaching his end. When Garrity notices Baker is also when these last contestants are approaching a large cleft between 2 hills. The road goes down the middle with 2 large hills on the side, and these hills form a wall of flesh. There are thousands upon thousands of spectators on these hills, to the point where they completely eclipse the landscape. The noise is cacophonous. It is so loud and so overwhelming, they literally can no longer speak to each other. They can no longer hear anything but the crowd. This wall of flesh is beating along the sides, undulating on the hills, and it creates this very disturbing visual as the boys are walking down the center of the road, surrounded by mountains of people. After they get through the hills and they're able to speak to each other again, Baker seeks out Garrity, and he admits that he's dying, he knows it, and he expresses his fears to Garrity about the fact that it's over. He has reached the end of his rope, and he's terrified. Garrity is very emotionally distraught over talking with Baker and over realizing that pretty soon, Baker's not going to be with them much longer. It is here that Garrity rejoins McVrees and Stebbins, specifically saying that he wants to continue walking with them right up until the very end. He wants to stay with his friends until he dies. Much to Garrity's surprise, Bill and Radigan both die before Baker. Baker, despite bleeding out and hemorrhaging from his nose, still continues stumbling forward much longer than they had anticipated, and it is agonizing for Garrity to watch. It is killing him as he sees his friends slowly succumb to the injuries and slowly succumb to the exhaustion. Finally, Baker approaches Garrity for the last time. He goes to him and he makes 2 requests. He says, please make sure that they give me a lead-lined coffin. And he asks that Garrity, his friend, he says, just please don't watch. Don't watch them do it. And Baker's final words to Garrity are, another place, another time. And finally, as Baker lags behind, Garrity hears the gunshots. He cries and looks away and keeps his promise. After the death of Baker, we are now 40 miles from Boston. We are down to the final 3, marking McVrees, Garrity, and Stebbins as the last people on the Long Walk. It is here, after talking with McVrees and Stebbins, that McVrees starts to drift to the side. He starts to almost lose consciousness as he stops walking forward and starts stumbling off towards the crowd. Garrity, of course, goes to his friend. He redirects him and tries to get him to keep walking onto the road. But finally, McVrees tells Garrity that he's done. He makes a call back to a conversation they had earlier about how when he was done, when he was finished, he would simply sit down and die. He would simply stop walking, and that is exactly what McVrees does. Despite Garrity's pleas, despite his tears, he begging McVrees to keep going. He says, I'm done, it's over, I'm ready to rest now. So McVrees sits down and closes his eyes, and Garrity, in a desperate attempt to save his friend, tries to pick him up, but realizes he's physically too weak and too exhausted to take McVrees with him. So he's forced to let go as the soldiers take McVrees and shoot him in the head. Garrity walks away from this and realizes that by now he has used up all of his tears. He is hollow after the death of McVrees. After this happens, Stebbins, of course, has to make a comment. He says, well, if souls exist, McVrees' soul is still close. You can catch him if you wanted to. Insinuating that if Garrity chose to right now, he could die. He could end the walk and he can go be with his friend. But Garrity looks him in the eye and says, no, I'm gonna walk you into the ground. We then get a time jump to 8 p.m. that night. They have been walking for hours since the death of McVrees, and it seems like Stebbins is unbeatable. Garrity, after losing all of his friends, after losing all hope, losing himself, he is a shell of a man, and he shambles forward and he realizes, I think I'm done. He sees Stebbins still walking ahead, and he thinks that I have nothing left. I think I'm ready to succumb. So he decides to go up to Stebbins and let him know, to consensually tell him, you win, I give up, and congratulate him. He manages to stumble forward just a little bit ahead to talk to Stebbins. And when Garrity goes to confront him, to talk to him one last time before he is planning on dying, it is Stebbins who suddenly reaches out to Garrity, shouts his name, and falls down dead. It is with the death of Stebbins that the long walk finally comes to an end. Garrity, however, despite the roaring crowd, despite the Major coming in on a jeep to congratulate him, cannot register anything around him. He cannot register the fact that Stebbins is gone, the fact that he has won and that he can stop walking. Garrity is left hollow. He looks ahead and is able to see a shadow. He hallucinates a figure walking the distance and breaks into a run to attempt to catch it. And that is where the novel ends, with Garrity running forward towards an unknown figure out in the distance. And that is the end of The Long Walk. I personally think the pacing of this book is a little inconsistent. The ending does come very abruptly. It ends with Garrity just continuing forward. Literally the last lines of the book are, he broke into a run, and that's it. Now, the way I personally interpreted this ending is that Garrity is left hollow, a shell of his former self. He is no longer a person. He has lost everything that made him Garrity. So by the end of the novel, there is nothing for him to do but keep walking. The prize doesn't exist. Yes, the prize is real. Yes, he could technically get whatever he wants, but it doesn't matter anymore. He's lost everything. He's lost everything that had been important to him. And the only thing left to do is just keep walking. It is an extremely tragic ending for this character that we have been following for the entirety of the novel. And honestly, to me, that is the point of The Long Walk. It is a commentary about uselessness and futility. It is a commentary about military enlistment and war. It is obviously written in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and it really shows. It is boys joining a crusade to die. They are joining a needless spectacle solely for the benefit of powers that are beyond them. And that is where the real tragedy is. The tragedy is watching kids, these young souls, suffer and die ultimately for no purpose. Garrity wins the walk, but what does he win? In the end, all he really comes to find out is that the long walk is a spectacle without meaning. It is a spectacle, it is suffering without any real justification or reward from it. So Garrity wins the long walk, but loses himself in the process. No one wins. They all lose. The prize doesn't exist. If you make it to the end of the long walk, you won't need anything else because you are no longer a human being. You are completely gone. I do think this ending is something that is not going to make everyone satisfied. It ends very abruptly. There is no resolution of tension. Garrity wins, but he just keeps going. And that is the point. That's the whole purpose. There is nothing to do but keep walking. Garrity has lost everything that was important to him. He has lost himself. He has lost his friends. And at this point, there was no going back. There's no returning to Freeport. There's no returning to his mom or returning to Jan. And Garrity the person is gone. He died on the long walk, and now there is nothing but a shell continuing to stumble forward. This video is like 2 hours long. How did that happen? This was gonna be like a 20-minute summary, and I just completely lost my mind. All right, if you actually made it to the end of this video, I applaud you. I have been dying to just talk about The Long Walk for forever. I don't have anyone in my life I can talk to about this book, and I have just been desperate to get all of my thoughts and feelings of this off my chest. So if you enjoyed this, wonderful. If not, I completely understand. I just like to ramble for hours on end. So congratulations for making it. This was so fun, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.